What is up? We are back. This is the movie discussion, Pocket Dimension, where time does not exist. The only thing that matters is film. I know we've been away for a while, but we wanted to come back with a bang. And so, as you can see from the title of the show, I hope that's what we're doing, and we'll get into that. I'm Cole, as always, joined by my second favorite native of Mississippi after Kermit the Frog, Jay the Stingray. Sorry, Jay, I just left Kermit. I was thinking about that fact the other day, so I thought I'd slide that in there. But anyway, yes, we're back after some time off, and we wanted it to be epic, as we announced on Twitter. So we went right for the gusto here for epic, and this is Once Upon a Time in America from 1984, from famed Italian director Sergio Leone. His final film, an epic, as we said, a crime drama, gangster epic. And I know that sometimes I get smarmy and I talk about like when there's like some sort of either really popular or well-known film, and sometimes I say like I have like an alternative to it that I like more. It's not exactly the same here, because I don't want people to think I necessarily think this is better than The Godfather. I just personally like it more than The Godfather is all I mean. I'm not saying, oh, don't bother with The Godfather, it's overrated and terrible. What? No, Godfather is a very excellent film, as most people would believe. And honestly, if you're going to do a comparison, this lines up better with Godfather 2 than the first one, because Godfather 2 is the one with all the flashbacks and stuff, and this movie really relies on flashback, which we will get into. So, Sergio Leone, Italian film doing spaghetti westerns. He's most notable for the Dollars trilogy with Clint Eastwood. And then, of course, he started off the whole Once Upon a Time thing himself with 1968's Once Upon a Time in the West, another Western, but a sort of a really different kind of Western, you know. And I was reading about him, I was thinking about those Westerns. They're often called Revisionist Westerns, which means like against sort of the grain that the classical Westerns had done, and sort of more realistic in a way. And that, you know, in the 40s and 50s, Westerns were super popular. But by the time you got into the 60s, and we're going to talk again about what we talked about before with our New Hollywood movement, you would have filmmakers changing things around for Westerns. Instead of it just being like all black and white, there's the good guys and the bad guys, that, you know, they'd mix it up and put a lot of shades of gray in between with anti-heroes and more morally ambiguous things, and they'd up the violence and things of that nature. And I was thinking that eventually we'll have to get around to doing at least a couple of those sorts of movies. I was reading about some. There were a few I hadn't even heard of that sound really interesting that perhaps we can get into at a later date. But anyway, getting back to Sergio Leone. So while he's most known for those Westerns, he obviously had other ambitions. And this film was maybe his greatest and his most ambitious film. And as early as 1967, he wanted to do this. This is loosely based on a book called The Hoods that came out in 1953 that Leone read sometime in the 60s and was really captivated by and really wanted to do a movie. And tying into The Godfather, guess what? So when The Godfather was getting put together and they didn't have a director for it yet, this was actually off. He turned it down because he wanted to focus on this project. His I don't know if he knew what the title was yet, but anyway, the project that would become Once Upon a Time in America. So there's a lot to talk about here, not because of how long and ambitious the movie is and everything that's in it, but also the genesis of it, because it has a very long gestation period from the late 60s. He couldn't get funding for it, and he was concerned about getting the rights. He eventually reached out to the guy who was the author of the book, and they connected because the guy was a fan of his other work. And throughout the 70s, they would have like regular meetings where Leone really wanted to get this guy's sort of, I guess, sort of his opinion on like America. Like he really saw the book, and I guess that's where the title comes from. He really saw the book as sort of a microcosm of America, the American dream, what it was in the 20th century. And throughout the 70s, it went through all sorts of different rewrites and such. And there were all kinds of, I disagree, but I do like that movie. But anyway, it went through all kinds of rewrites, and pretty much anybody who was a name in Hollywood in the 70s at one point had their name penciled in for this movie. All sorts of roles were penciled in. Yeah, there's a Jewish angle to this movie too, which is a little different. Shalom. Thanks, Kenny. But yeah, so like all sorts of names, including Gerard Depardieu. At one point, he was obsessed with like being in it, and he wanted to get the Brooklyn accent right, and maybe he couldn't. I don't know, but
Man,
at one point, like
that. would love to
like
hear
some
him
of these
do it.
names, a lot of these names like make sense like in context when you hear about it. It's like, okay, yeah, because of where they were in their career and their age and stuff. You see something like, but the one that really gets me is Richard Dreyfuss was cast in Robert De Niro's role at one point, which is the main character, Noodles. Can you imagine Richard Dreyfuss as that character? I think Richard Dreyfuss was a good actor, but I do not think I could buy him as some sort of like Prohibition era gangster. That would be tough.
I don't know. I mean, he's a really good actor, but yeah.
See Richard Dreyfuss doing rape scenes? Somebody getting raped by Richard Dreyfuss? I mean, I know that we're biased because of his roles, like in Jaws and I don't know, Close Encounters and stuff like that. But I'm just thinking, they're actors, they play parts, they play different roles. But it's really hard for me to imagine Richard Dreyfuss pulling that off. And anyway, of course, that did not happen. Other names in there, you got Harvey Keitel, Dustin Hoffman, even freaking John Belushi at one point. I like that John Malkovich is one of the ones who was considered for the role of Max, because that's one I could see. So Max is the role played by James Woods. I could see John Malkovich in that role. I mean, I think it worked out well with James Woods. James Woods it's interesting when you get the two leads being De Niro and Woods, because of where they were in their careers. Because at this point, De Niro is red hot. He is like the man in Hollywood. And he's already kind of proven that he can do this sort of role. Like, if you look at things like Taxi Driver and Raging Bull, he already shown that he can sort of play like a deeply flawed human being that maybe you can still sort of root for in some ways. That it's like he's already sort of done that. And he's doing it again. James Woods, on the other hand, had basically been a character actor to this point. I don't know if he'd had a leading role outside a movie that we covered on this, which would not really be considered a big movie, Videodrome. What would have been a fairly small-scale Canadian film at the time, which I think was maybe his first real leading role. But anyway, I don't know if that would have made much of an impression on Hollywood at large back in the day, in the early 80s. So maybe it was instead of taking a risk getting James Woods in this, I don't know. But anyway. So other names that are actually in the movie, Elizabeth McGovern, who I'm not too familiar with, but I know I've seen her in other things. And of course, her younger self is played by Jennifer Connelly, which was a pretty good bit of casting because she did look a bit. You could see how like she aged into that. Although people who like me who are big Jennifer Connelly fanboys, I've always loved her so much. I think she's a great beauty. I'd say Elizabeth McGovern isn't quite as attractive as Jennifer Connelly would turn out to be.
I'll agree with that.
Neither here nor there for the sake of the movie. So here's the other thing too about the casting. So this movie, as we'll get into, jumps between timelines. And we have sometimes characters played in all three timelines. So we have like kid versions, and then younger versions, and then old, and then like 30-something versions, and then like characters in their 60s. Originally, they were going to have different actors for the old versions too. Because in the movie, what we wound up with, in the case of Elizabeth McGovern, James Woods, and Robert De Niro, is that they are all there in the 68 timeline, just like, with makeup to age them.
Mm-hmm.
But that was not the original intent. The original intent was to have yet another set of actors to play the older versions. At one point, James Cagney, of all people, was going to be the older Noodles, which I guess was sort of a throwback to gangsters from that era, since that's what he played back at that time.
I think the way works the best. I think the makeup is good enough.
I think it's good enough. Although it's kind of weird that they didn't even really try with Elizabeth McGovern. It's hard to buy that her character's in her 60s at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, they do comment on De Niro's character. Noodles actually says something like how like she's barely aged, I guess. But they're just like, But anyway, they do a pretty good job. It's true too, because like we've actually seen James Woods and Robert De Niro get older. In fact, they're even older now than those roles, and that's kind of basically what they looked like at that point in their lives, more or less.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I think you're right. I think that was the right way to go. But, yeah, the original intent was to actually have a third set of actors for the older versions of the characters.
Yeah, I mean, it would be possible, but, I mean, there's no way you could cast someone that looked, like those guys.
Yeah.
I guess you could do.
I mean, there's always suspension of disbelief when you have that sort of thing going on. You're like, okay, sure, it's we're gonna say it's the same character.
The Rian Johnson movie where they made the guy look like Bruce Willis.
Bruce Willis, yeah, Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
You could do something like that.
I mean, that's in no way believable. Like their facial structures, even their ears are different. Like Jesus, it's just like, well, we have Bruce Willis attached to this movie, so we're going to use him. You know, I get it.
Yeah, that's what it was. We're going to use him, and we got this other guy who's huge right now too. So
yeah, very true. So anyway, back to this movie. So I'm trying to think. So obviously a huge movie. The main cut that we're doing here is known as the European cut. Clocks in at just under 4 hours. So this breaks a new record for us. This is the longest movie we've covered so far. And of course, there was an even longer cut that is only recently became available. Which let's see, this version's like 229 minutes, and I think the new version is like 250 something like that. It'd be very interesting. Anyway, if you buy like the 2011 or 2012 release, you can get that version, which I'd be very interested to see.
me too.
For sure. And I don't own the movie yet, so that'll be cool.
When you're watching a 4-hour-long movie, adding another 20 minutes is not going to be that big of a deal.
Yeah, exactly. Plus, it does. You can tell in watching even this longer cut that there are a few plot threads that don't seem to get addressed. I know one of the things is there's definitely more of Joe Pesci's character in the longer cut, because you can tell like there's supposed to be more going on with him, and it just sort of gets dropped and they move on from it. In fact, I have a question about that for later in there. But anyway, so obviously, jumping past pre-production and stuff to its release. This is, we've talked about movies that got cut down and executive meddling. This movie is one of the ultimate examples of that. In that, so they finally, he had something like over 6 hours, and then they cut it down to 2 minutes, which I guess he was more or less satisfied with, and that was released in European theaters. But for American, without telling, the American distributors just ripped about 90 minutes off that. They brought it way down, and the movie tanked. It did terribly.
Did it?
And then there were people that like didn't even know that there was a longer cut that was. And not only did they do that, but they also put it in chronological order. So they removed the flashbacks and just made it all play in like one linear structure. Which I can't think of talk about raping a movie, because one of the things I like about this movie is I think some of the transitions are my favorites. I love the transition scenes between time periods, like the memory, coming back. I love how that's done with the music and the thing. And think some are done so deliberately. Think how much that would be ruined. Okay, so there's a part where in the 1968 timeline, after Noodles has come back to New York and he's met with Fats and he's going to stay the night, and then he walks around for a bit, and then he goes into the old bathroom so he can move the tile so he can look into the room where he, of course, it's a transition of him looking, his eyes, close up of his eyes, and then it's younger self's eyes, watching her. That's just completely removed if you put the chronological thing. How would that even work? So it's him staring, and then you just move on to the next scene of whatever else happens in 1968. That's fucking terrible, especially considering the music, the old music, with that clarinet song playing, is still playing in his, I guess, in his head, right, in his mind, his memory, as we're seeing De Niro. So that music would start playing, and it just cut scene, oh my god, yeah, just butchering a movie and just betraying the director's artistic vision. That's just, it's infuriating to think about.
Honestly, I do feel like the film is too long. I just feel like it should have been split into two. Because a modern audience is not going to go see and sit down for that period of time. But
his original intent was for it to be 2 3-hour movies, and they wouldn't let him do it.
Yeah, that's what I would like to see.
That was what he originally decided when he had about 6 hours. He said, "Can we release it as 2 3 hours?" And they're like, "No, those movies flop." And then they got to flop anyway because then they butchered it.
Can't you imagine? They would be begging him to do that now.
Yeah. Please, I'm not going to disagree with you, but I like this. I'm just going to say this is a movie that I really have always really liked. So I don't mind the length one bit.
It's just a chore for me to watch in one sitting, and I don't like to not watch films in one sitting because you feel different about things if you don't watch it all the way through.
And it is difficult to pull off. To set enough time aside to be able to do that. I realize that.
This is why I just wish it could be
a big. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and then there is sort of a big difference even between, let's say, you watch 2 movies back to back. It still doesn't feel quite as draining as focusing all on one long movie instead.
Mm.
It's just not as taxing.
Right.
At least I don't think so. But anyway, I don't find this too taxing because I just really am absorbed in the story, and I understand what you mean because some of the length is a bit gratuitous. Because okay, let's go back. So although I'm going to argue that it's something I like about the movie, so we'll go back again, where he has come back to New York and he's at the restaurant club thing or whatever. Because okay, so after he has a conversation with him and he's trying to ask him like, "What have you been doing all these years?" and he cuts him off and says, "So Fats says, okay, I'll leave you." From that point on to the point where he walks through the room, walks downstairs, and then goes into the bathroom, and it's like almost 3 full minutes pass of just Robert De Niro wandering around. So I understand that you could think it's easy to make a cut there, but I don't mind because. Sorry,
I like that. I like the long cuts and it really focuses your attention on certain things. But when it's 4 hours long, it is a bit much. You're like, come on, let's go to the next scene already. Sometimes, but yeah, I get it. I mean, it's there for a reason. I think modern audiences especially hate that kind of stuff. So
yeah,
it's like an attention span,
and it can be done wrong, right? If it's done wrong, then it's just irritating. But how I feel, I'm going to argue that I think it's done really well in this. I really like it. It really sucks me in, and I like how it feels real. Instead of people just getting to the point like you're supposed to in movies, it's more like real life. It's like, well, we might dance around it first, look around. So that happens a few times in the movie. I also am a really big fan, and this is why it works for me too. So the one thing I didn't remark upon when I was talking about Leone's career is like, if this is a Sergio Leone movie, well, then the music is done by one man. And that would be his partner in crime for that, Ennio Morricone, who did all his other films, and very famous, well celebrated guy. In fact, I was thinking about him because when Quentin Tarantino, who's a big fan of both men, did The Hateful Eight. He got him to score that, and that was his first score in a long time. And you can see that he wanted to evoke things like this movie and Once Upon a Time in the West. Anyway, we'll get to that as we go on. So he was already well before this movie. He just like Leone, he was really well known, and probably the score from I guess the Dollar trilogy, like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. It's a super famous, iconic score that everybody knows. Even people that haven't watched the movie, they know that they know that music. But I'm going to make the argument that this is the best score. I adore this score. I love this music so much, and it's just really, and that's one of the reasons why I don't mind some of the long takes and stuff, because I think the music builds so much atmosphere and feeling. I love the music in every scene. I love how it's done. Even the stuff he didn't write himself. There's a couple of popular songs he did his own arrangements with, most notably the Beatles song "Yesterday." I love that. That's like, I hadn't seen this movie in almost 15 years when I watched it again. And then when you have the transition where he's in the train station in 1933, and then it transitions to him being in the train station in 1968, and this beautiful orchestral version of "Yesterday" comes on. I loved it. I wish I could have had huge speakers or headphones on or something, because it's just so overwhelming. And I mean, you could say, well, that's easy. That's one of the most popular songs of all time. I know, but still, it's done well, because it really lets you know right off that we've jumped ahead in time, that we're in a completely different world now. As soon as you hear that, because it's the Beatles now. We're out of Prohibition, New York, and we're into the late 60s. So anyway, so there's a few times where I love how the music swells and brings up such emotion, and that's one of the reasons why I don't mind the longer takes, because the music is filling it in. For instance, so there's quite a few periods where there's no audible dialogue, and I don't mind because the music fills it all in. Going back again, as the most recent example is when he leaves the station, when he walks the streets, he eventually calls Fats on a payphone, and we don't hear any of the conversation. There's no audible dialogue. We see them talking on the phone to each other, but we don't have and you don't care because the music is playing over it. I love that. I think it's brilliantly done. So that's another reason why I adore this film so much, is because I love the score. It's one of my favorite scores of any movie. It'd be easily top 10, maybe top 5. I don't know, but it's top 10 for sure. I love the score. And I think sometimes it even gets overlooked only because his other scores are so iconic and well known. but I think it's great.
How long was the production on this film? Do you know?
About 2 years.
I can imagine. Yeah.
As far as shooting, I think shooting.
Just total.
I guess about it was like 1 year of shooting and like a year of pre-production before that, or something like that.
Because scoring a film this long would take a long time as well.
Yeah, so I think around 1980, he felt like he was ready to go, even though other things weren't in place. And then I don't know if we talked about this before when we did movies of a similar time period, but at that time, around 1980, the early 80s, there was a writer's strike in Hollywood, and that really slowed down production for all sorts of movies. Now, also speaking about the time period, I think the longest movie we had done on this show up to this point was from 1980. It was Heaven's Gate. And that was to finish our New Hollywood series, because we talked about how if there was one way to end New Hollywood, like Heaven's Gate kind of put the nail in the coffin because of all the things, like all the struggles that movie had, and because the director was kind of going mad with power and wasting money, and then they created a movie that wound up not being very successful. But the other thing to note is that, as we said, whenever you're talking about eras, because they're not clearly defined, people just sort of say, so we said the New Hollywood era, that's roughly 67 to maybe 80, if we want to say 81 stuff. But there's never like a hard beginning or hard ending for these things. It's easy to make the argument that this movie is sort of a leftover remnant of that era, because it has all those things. It's super ambitious.
Right.
It's long. It costs a lot. It's really about like one guy's. I mean, it's a big movie. It has tons of people involved in it, but it's really about one guy's creative vision. This being Leoné. So I think this movie is sort of like one of the remnants of that, kind of a last gasp. And it makes sense. And it would make sense in a way, because if not for a few other factors, it would have come out a few years earlier. So by 84, you could say New Hollywood was dead, and this movie is kind of like an echo of it, because I think it checks all the boxes for being that kind of film. And just like Heaven's Gate, it wound up failing tremendously. But on this case, I would say that's not because any fault of the filmmaker. It's because of what the distributors did to it. So nowadays, we always talk about director's cuts. Like, director's cut is just, you don't even have to be a cinephile to talk about director's cuts. But back in the 70s, 80s, even 90s, director's cut was not really a common thing that people always talked about. This movie, if you lived at least in North America, you couldn't see it. 2003, when they finally gave it I think its first DVD release, where you got its release kind of popularized the term director's cut. Now it's thrown around everywhere. Every movie has a goddamn director's cut. But this was one of the most significant ones. This was a really important director's cut that people really needed to see. So, and it was long overdue. And now there's sort of a second director's cut, as we said, that came out in 2011 or 2012.
Since DVD era, I think it seems to be a big thing. I mean, It was, in limited capacity before, but now you could have both on the same disc, potentially.
Yeah, exactly. And this is one of the few movies where sometimes when you talk about director's cut versus original, there's some changes here and there, but it's not major. This is one of the movies where this changes everything, where it's night and day by how different it is, because there's just so much more content, and also because of the order of the story.
So Heaven's Gate was what, 1980?
Yeah.
And it was also edited pretty heavily when it was released, right?
Yeah.
I know he did a cut, he edited it himself, then they re-edited the version they actually played.
Yeah.
And
then, this movie was edited much worse.
Yeah.
They cut 90 minutes out of this movie, whereas Heaven's Gate, he got it down to something like 3.5 hours, and they more or less went with that. Even though he wasn't happy, it was still his own changes.
Oh, okay. It was released at 3.5. Okay. I'm
pretty sure.
Wow.
Anyway, that's a good show, and it's an interesting one to talk about, but neither of us could really salvage that movie. Even though we had things to say about it, they were positive. I don't think either of us could come away saying, well, because it was another one of those movies that people think have flipped a little bit. It's history will prove that it's actually a really good movie.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think they were kind of right the first time. I don't think it was terrible. Like all that stuff is back to of what the production was and the stuff the director was doing and how much money was costing and all that stuff. So it really is sort of the poster child for like that kind of disaster. I get that. So I don't think it's as bad as all the stuff surrounding it made it out to be, but I still think it's not a good movie. It certainly has some merit, and we talked about it on the show, some beautiful cinematography, some good acting, but it's a really incoherent movie. Really incoherent, really difficult to follow, difficult to understand at parts. All sorts of stuff that could easily have been cut out, and I don't think would have made any damn difference. But as far as I feel, at least, I think this movie's a tremendous success, a wonderful movie that can't be judged by such a terrible cut. You need to see the European cut or whatever, or some longer cut to really see the director's vision.
So it really didn't get the proper acclaim in North America until then.
Yeah, it was delayed by decades.
Wow.
Except for like people in those circles who managed, like you said, like the small, like some film critics, like there's a story going around, I think you find Wikipedia, where some prominent film critic, like before, and then sometime later they got to see the longer European cut because I don't know, because I guess critics have access to stuff that we don't. And then he turned around and called it not just the best film of the year, but one of the best films of the decade. So it really shows the difference it makes.
So I guess it's really just victim of the time period it was released, because I mean, you could almost say Heaven's Gate was one of the reasons why they probably cut it down so short.
Oh, absolutely. I think so. As we said, Heaven's Gate was sort of like the absolute last gasp for that stuff. So then they're like, okay, we know that this guy's got a great reputation, like Leoné stuff, but he's kind of like the other guy. Like, look how long this fucking thing is, and he wants to tell it all out of order. He wants to not have a linear story. That's crazy,
Yeah.
Oh, and
it's
also
kind of like. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, besides the music, I also want to point out, besides that guy whose name I keep forgetting, even though it's right in front of me. But anyway, the Italian composer who was partners with him, Morricone. You also had pan flute music in some places, and I guess it was still composed by him, but it was actually performed by the pan flute guy himself, that like Zamfir guy, that world famous pan flute guy. And that's another thing Tarantino would use in his movies too, or at least one of them. I remember one of Tarantino's movies has like the same sort of pan flute thing going on that's clearly like inspired by this film.
Which one is that? Is that Django?
I think it might be Kill Bill Volume 1 or 2. Yeah, it's one of the Kill Bills, I think. Yeah. Because I remember pretty well, and I know the Kill Bills because they're my favorite Tarantinos. Even though they're not very original in a way. They're just him taking a bunch of stuff from movies he likes and putting together, which is nothing wrong with, because it's kind of the same thing I would probably do if I was a filmmaker. And actually, one of the films that's a big influence on that is one that we're hoping to do eventually here, if we can get access to it. We had some trouble with that. I won't say what it is, but yeah, there's a movie, another one that Tarantino really likes a lot and riffs on and uses stuff from. And that was actually, originally we were going to do that first, but that got delayed. But anyway, so hopefully down the line we can get to that movie. But anyway, yeah, so you have the pan flute music too.
Whenever I think of pan flute, I think of that guy you're talking about. Really out of place.
Yeah, Zamfir.
Zamfir, but he did like an infomercial, like selling a CD or something, and he would show him.
Yeah, that's like how everybody knows. That's why people know who he is, right? It's like he's a world-renowned master, and it's like he sold more. It's like, I don't know if it's true, but they've like alleged he sold more albums than like Michael Jackson or something.
Wow.
I have no idea if it's true, but I remember that was something that you could see on that. But anyway, it's like, you can use pan flute, you might as well use the master. But yeah, and also you would think that would sound kind of out of place in this movie, and it doesn't. It actually fits in pretty well. I'm kind of surprised, because the rest of the movie is basically, big orchestral swells.
I mean,
but the pan flute sounds pretty good.
Was pan flute like a thing in the 20s and 30s?
I don't think so.
Okay, I was just, maybe it was something I wasn't aware of.
So I don't think over here anyway. In the West, in like because I mean, pan flute originates from what, like South America, right? It's like Peru.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
I'm pretty sure. Pan flute's like Peruvian or something like that.
So actually,
but yeah, I remember the. Yeah, sweet.
One of the ones that I actually own, and unfortunately, this does not have the director's cut on it. But I didn't realize it
Or
was
the new director's cut.
yeah, the new director's cut, right? But
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. I didn't realize the history behind the film, that it was not released until the early 2000s. Because when I bought this, I hadn't actually even seen the movie. So,
What's weird is that obviously I didn't see the whole thing, but I have very, very old memories of this movie. So I'm guessing that possibly sometime in the early 90s, when I was quite young, some probably very heavily edited version ran on TV. Because I have very old memories of some of the scenes from this movie, and that could be the only way I could have seen it. It was probably maybe the cut down version that got released in North American theaters in the 80s. I don't know, but yeah, some of that I still remember. But
so I can imagine the multiple rape scenes were not in that version.
Probably not. As I said, I don't remember if I even sat down and watched the whole thing, or if I just caught part of it. Wouldn't have had any idea what it was. It might have just been something that caught my interest for a while, and I saw some scenes from. Is probably how it was. So that's the other thing. Yeah. So there's a couple of rape scenes in this, and people say you can't make that movie today. I don't know. You can still show rape in film today. I guess it's a little different though, because it's like our main character doing the rape. It's like, oh, he's supposed. But I mean, again, it's sort of the point, right? Like he's not necessarily supposed to be this great guy.
Right. I think they're showing you that, but I mean, it's a different time, so I don't think.
True. And we can talk more about that too. Histories. Because at least one of the scenes you could say, well, is it rape? And, we can talk about that. But trying to find more of a starting point. Like, I don't want to take people through the story. It's not what we're here to. But there's another thing I really like also is, okay, so you have this movie. It's almost 4 hours long. For about the first 35 minutes, the first time you watch it, you do not know what's going on. And that's the point, right? It starts the night of Max and the other guys' deaths. And all we get is so it's the 30s. There's some sort of celebration going on. Kate Smith's rendition of what is it? God Bless America playing. And then you've got these other gangsters looking to find another guy. They killed the girlfriend, and they're hunting him down, and they beat up Fats, but we don't know who Fats is yet. Fats gives him up, says that he's hiding in the opium den in the Chinese place, but he manages to escape. Kills one of his pursuers. But then he finds out that from Fats that his girlfriend has been murdered, and he goes to get money. Apparently, he has got money stashed away at this train station, and there is no money, and then he has to skip town. And we have no idea who he is or what's going on or other people died, and that's all on purpose, is to keep you off balance, and that's the point. That's why the story's told in the way it is, so that it fills you in later. But it does make for a confusing watch the first time, because you really don't know what's going on, who these characters are, why people are after him. I mean, they say something like a guy who rats on his friend, some sort of snitch. It's like, okay, snitch, something. And he obviously knows the people that you see out by the cops covering up. And one of them make a point showing his face is all messed up. You can't see his face. And obviously that becomes important later, but at the time you don't know what it means. So yeah, so the movie bounces between three main timelines: 1933, or the earlier 30s leading into 33. I guess that may be a period of 1 or 2 years, and then 1968. And then it's funny, if you look on Wikipedia, it's wrong. Wikipedia says it's 1899. That's way too far back. It's got to be like 1917 or 1918, because if you look, and you can do the math, because in 1968, he visits the graves of his friends, and it shows their birth dates, and they were born in 1905 and 1907. So you age them up a little bit. They were probably, some of them were about 12, 13, whatever. So 1917, 1918 makes sense for the earliest time frame.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking 20s, the early 20s.
Yeah, I'd say just before that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's close enough anyway. Could be early 20s.
And like you mentioned earlier, another, it makes it kind of unique that it focuses on the Jewish community.
Right. This isn't Irish gangsters. This isn't Italian gangsters. This is Jewish gangsters. So that's a neat angle too. And I think it's another thing that really interested Leone and made him give it the title, and why he sort of thought like this is America, because it's like, again, the story of, these people are the children of poor immigrants growing up in really harsh conditions, and so many of them, crime is really the only option they have. They're just struggling to get by, and there's not really any other options available to them. So yeah, I think that's another thing, reason why he gave it the title Once Upon a Time in America, because he obviously feels like this is a story that really encapsulates what it, the struggle that a lot of people in America had at that time of different backgrounds. And it's interesting to focus on the Jewish guys, because why not? I mean, there were Jewish gangsters. It's true. I mean, the book it's based on was about Jewish gangsters, so there is truth to it. I don't know how closely this comes to the book, but at least as a real guy is he calls himself Gray Real Nerd or something. So, they become gangsters at just right time because Prohibition kicks in, and that's when being a gangster is very lucrative, as we see. And it was a period that like a lot of people really enjoyed, because like you think, oh, I really like to drink and party, but now the government has stepped in and put in a law and it's illegal to drink. Well, that just made it so much more fun, didn't it? It's like now we get to do it in secret speakeasies down underground and stuff, and we play hot jazz music that the Negroes play. It's all so fast and crazy, and so a lot of people were probably a little disappointed when Prohibition ended. And of course, as they showed, it had a severe economic impact on the bootleggers, because that's how they were making all their money. And now suddenly, and that's what he says, oh, Prohibition's ending, we're going to be out of a job or unemployed. So the good times are rolling. Well, that was going on.
Right. And then when Prohibition ended in 33, 34, something like that, they had to like figure out something else to do for money. I'm like, shit. So they were going to rob the Federal Reserve or something?
So that was like Max's idea. You don't know how serious he was about it. But so the story has various characters, but the main characters in it is the friendship between Max and Noodles. And the main difference between them is that Noodles, he didn't have any objection to what they did. He didn't mind, that he was a criminal or even killing people and stuff. But he didn't want to really go beyond what he knew. He was satisfied with what they did. Whereas Max saw the bigger picture and always wanted more to expand. And the first time it's brought up is the stuff with Joe Pesci's character, because they meet Joe Pesci. They never use the word, but obviously Joe Pesci is a mafia figure. He's part of the Italian mob. And they carry out a job for him that has sort of a twist, because there's a part where actually they wind up, after they commit a robbery for this guy, played by, who is it, Burt Young?
Burt Young.
Is that his name? Burt Young. So yeah, if you're a fan of certain actors, it is kind of a treat to see a scene where Burt Young, Joe Pesci, Robert De Niro, and James Woods all sit down and have a conversation. I mean, that's kind of cool. That's just sort of a cool thing to see, all these guys in the early 80s together. So anyways, they pull off this job on behalf of Burt Young, but then you find out after they kill him is that apparently Joe Pesci had changed the deal and said, I want you to double cross him. I want you to give him the diamonds, then kill him and take the diamonds. And the whole thing was that Noodles, De Niro's character, was not told about this. James Woods decides, Max decides not to tell him. He gets mad about it. And he just says, well, I don't like the idea. He's like, we got to get in with this guy. This guy's a big deal. And De Niro, or Noodles, I'm going to stop using actors' names. And Noodles is just like, but what if his next thing is like, he says, get rid of this guy. What if his next thing is he tells me to get rid of you? I'm not comfortable with that. So we sort of see where they're at with that, where you could say Max is more pragmatic and realistic, but on the other hand, you could say that Noodles has legitimate concerns. At least we're controlling what we do. If we move up the way you want to move up, other people are going to call the shots and things could change. So, they both have sort of legitimate points to make. And then the other thing is eventually they get involved in the stuff with the unions, right? Strike breakers and unions. And you can tell Noodles isn't comfortable with any of that because it has sort of a political angle to it. He doesn't like that. Whereas once again, Max is saying, we can't do this forever. Be gangsters running around hoods, shooting people and stuff. Moving into politics makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of power to, if we can be connected to powerful politicians, the sky's the limit. So that's another one of their points where they diverge on what they think should be done. And as we'll find out, that's exactly what Max winds up doing. You're doing full spoilers for this movie, people.
Oh, yeah.
Heads up now if you haven't seen the movie. If you want to wait and put this episode aside until you can track down and watch all 4 hours of this great movie, you go ahead now, because we're going to get into spoilers, and obviously it involve Max. when we put things together later. But again, and of course the other major character is Deborah, who is Noodle's love interest from when he was a kid, and the dynamic between them is that like she's kind of a rare exception in that she sees all, she's in the same situation they're all in, but she never thinks for a second that she's going to be crooked or be part of that world. She wants to be an actress and she wants it to be legit. And that's the main wedge between them is like, she seems to have genuine affection for him, but she's just saying, you'll just always be a cheap hood. And I can't get involved with that.
Yeah. And then he rapes her and that kind of throws a wrench in the relationship.
Okay. That's much later. That's in the 30s. So it's not when they're kids, but yes. Although that's sort of the same thing, right? So we have a point, maybe we'll get around to it, but anyway, there's a point where Max is actually gone for most of the 20s because he's in jail because of something he had to do when he was a kid. And then when he comes out, in a way, it's kind of, I mean, I'm not saying it's great to be in jail for all that time, but in a way, it's nice because Max and the others have done all the work for him. He comes out and they've got this great, successful bootlegging business.
Mm-hmm.
Fats has inherited the place. The place is booming and they're making tons of money. And then, of course, he has his reunion with Deborah. She's nice to him, but she's still keeping her distance from him. And then as things go on, some more stuff happens, and he starts. They pull off some more jobs. They get more power. He takes her on that date, right? Because he wants to show her that he's not just a cheap hood. He pulls out all the stops. They go to this restaurant that he rented out, so it's just the two of them. He tries his best to impress her. At the end of the day, and it's sort of the same thing though as she said when she's a kid. It's like, I like you, and there's things I like about you, but at the end of the day, you're still a criminal. You're still a hood, and I don't want to be part of that, and I have dreams of my own. And she says something like, you'd wind up keeping me. And the worst part is I probably wouldn't even mind. But she's like, I don't want to be kept. I'm going to Hollywood for my dream. And that's where he just sort of loses it and rapes her. So, and a pretty good rape scene because it's by good rape scene. What I mean is,
it's one of my favorite rape scenes. I know
that. I'll give it an 8 out of 10. But it's good because we talked about this before when we did like the big, the most crazy rape scene when we did a Irreversible, 10 minutes, brutal, never pulls away, just awful circumstances. This is different, and this is more of the normal, not normal, but this is the more typical sort of rape in that like a woman is actually being raped by somebody she knows pretty well, where it starts out like almost like it's like a date rape situation, because like in Irreversible, it's kind of like this does happen, but it's like the less often thing where like some terrible criminal accosts you in an alley. But anyway. In that, we talk about like stuff about how much you need to show, what's gratuitous, all I can think is like a lot of movies nowadays, if they have rape scenes at all, they're quick and they try to spare you, which I get, and they just want to say, okay, we've shown enough to show that a rape has happened, we can cut away now. I'm glad this movie doesn't. I'm glad this movie lingers a bit and really goes to completion on it, because otherwise you're not really going to get the right effect. If you show him starting to rape her and then it cuts away and then it ends with like just the next shot is like her getting out of the car, it doesn't work as well. You need to see the whole thing happen. You need to see how it starts, the middle, and the end. I really feel like you do need to see all that, because if you don't see enough, it's easy to almost start making excuses for Max, because you might think, oh, maybe he wasn't that bad, or he stopped, or once she said no, like it shows like she's resisting pretty hard and saying no and stuff, and like he still keeps going, and then he even like repositions her and makes sure he gets to the finish and everything like that. So I think that's important because it's showing like this is not like some half done rape. This is fully done.
Well,
I don't know. I think that's important.
De Niro's method. So wonder how many people he had to rape before he got that right.
Oh man.
Yeah, I mean, it really makes you dislike your lead character like quite a bit.
And it shows that he hasn't changed.
Right.
Which is sort of the point that she is making. Because if we go all the way back, to his first sexual thing, so there's this whole thing when they're kids and they're running around working for the local, they're doing small time crimes. And that's when and Max is not part of the gang. Max meets them. He comes from the Bronx and he meets them at first. They seem like they're going to be, it seems like they're going to be enemies. They're both pretty good. I mean, I would say that Leoné seems to understand how to cinematically do rape and like not make it cheap and exploitative and still have it give it the gravitas. I mean, we're going to talk about like a director that can actually handle it well. I'd say he's right up there. But anyway, so it seems like he and Max, of course, are going to like at first going to be enemies, but then when the cop tries to bust them, the cop that they call Fart Face, I think, isn't that what they call him? The local cop is like crooked as hell, right? He like there's like a there's a local small time guy called Bugsy. He kind of runs the show around there, and Fart Face, is paid by him to look the other way and let him get away with stuff. And also, but he's still, since this is before they're working with Bugsy. And like, so he's cracking down on these kids and stuff, and they all come for our face. It's pretty funny. So anyway, they have this whole thing about busting him for the watch. And you think, okay, like, so here's Max, this new cocky guy, and he's stealing the mark and stealing the watch, and Noodles isn't going to like him. But then they sort of like unite against the common foe, that is this beat cop, and then they become friends right after that. So anyway, getting into that, there's also, I think in his apartment building, there's a girl about his age named Peggy. And she's part of that world. See, this is what Deborah could have done, but this is not what Deborah does. Whereas Peggy's like going to use how she can be a criminal in this world is kind of, well, it's the era, so she can use her body. So she's basically sort of like an amateur prostitute. And so that's his sort of first sexual experience. And when he sees her coming, they have that whole awkward thing in the bathroom and stuff, and he's trying to get her to look at him. And then he like starts pawing, and it's like, and it shows that he's not any different all those years later. He's like, oh, once I get going, I can't stop. And he actually does stop, but that's only because she says, I'll let you do whatever you want, but you got to pay me. And she actually wants to get paid by like some sort of fancy pastry. And I love how the scene goes because it's so awkward and off-putting because he's still like grinding on her. And he's going, yeah, okay, I'll do it tomorrow. And it's showing like the desperation and like how pervy he is. And all those years later, when he's an adult, he still does because that's what he does to Deborah. It's like, okay, his brain has processed that she's rejected him, that she's leaving. And like all his brain can do now is like, but I gotta, and then he rapes her. So I kind of like that. It shows that like he learned nothing. He hasn't changed. So yeah, you can't really like him. All you can do is feel for some of the things that he's gone through. It's supposed to be like real life. People aren't all good or all bad and stuff. And I know some people just like, he's a rapist, evil. Okay, fine. I'm not going to try to defend rapists, but I'm just saying, and I guess that's the main reason why a movie like this wouldn't be made today. You can still show rape in film, I think, today, but you have to make it you can't have anybody who's like a main character or somebody that's maybe supposed to be in any way sympathetic doing it. Whereas this movie, there are things that do make him sympathetic. Maybe not 100%. And anyway, Peggy grows up and becomes part of their gang later, too. It's pretty funny. But yeah, this is funny. I was saying to Jay before the show, like, I'd watched the movie twice last week because, there were a couple times we thought we were going to get a show last week and then it fell through and we weren't able to do it. So I was watching it for a third time today. I couldn't, it's a super long movie, didn't have time to. So I was only watching bits and pieces of it and I was fast forwarding it. It was only then that I realized, there's that scene where he's in the bathroom with Peggy. This is when they're kids, 1917. And he's, grinding on her saying, oh, yeah, he has to get some and stuff. And she says, fine, as long as you pay me. And he insists he'll do it tomorrow. But then there's a scene of another one of the characters in the gang, Patsy, buying the pastry, incidentally, from Fats, and bringing it up so that he can use it so that he can lose his virginity to Peggy. And there's a sort of a neat scene about sort of the loss of innocence where it's like, this is his ticket. He's going to use this. But so he has to wait in the hall. And then there's, again, you could say maybe the movie's being too long here, but I like it. A very fairly long take of him, like, unwrapping the pastry, first just looking at it, then just using his finger to take a little cream off, thinking, okay, I'm going to leave it. And of course, the whole thing is, over time, he just devours the whole thing and decides, you know what, worth it. This is better. I know this was my ticket to sex, but I think I'll eat the thing. Which is a really funny scene. The first 2 times I watched it, I thought that was Noodles. It was only the third time it kicked in that it wasn't. And it's kind of confusing why it isn't Noodles. I mean, on the one hand, I get it. The fact is, she's Peggy. She'll give it up to anybody that pays. That's the point, right? And they illustrate that very well later on. But my brain did not at first click in that was not Noodles. And it seems sort of weird because you have a scene where he says, yes, tomorrow I'll do it. And then what is presumably tomorrow, we see a kid buying it, but it's not him. And I realize you could say, well, it's a different actor. I don't know. Sometimes I'm bad with faces. These kids look the same to me. I don't know. So it wasn't until the third time that I realized that was Patsy. Anyway, the next cut after that is Peggy getting screwed by the cop and them taking a picture so they can blackmail him.
Right.
And then again, it really shows. So this is so funny. So a lot of movies really, there's all sorts of coming of age movies that handle how people lose their virginity, and the whole point is like how it's not cinematic or romantic. And I think in real life we can all say like a lot of people their first time probably wasn't that romantic or ideal. It was probably clumsy or out of nowhere or something like that. And I think, I mean, mine wasn't great either, but I mean, mine was actually planned out and stuff, at least to a certain extent. I don't know. It makes stuff like this look crazy. Like, can you imagine? It's hard for me to like I can relate to being like in my teens and being super horny, for sure. I can relate to that. I can't relate to being on a rooftop where you just watched a grown man fuck this underage girl. You use the picture of him to blackmail him into basically giving you the same deal he gave Bugsy, the whole look the other way. But also, you're going to use him. You're going to say, oh, by the way, I want to run a Peggy, and you're going to pay for it. And he's so amused by this. It's like my first time, and a lousy cop's paying for it. So now he finally gets to have his first time. He gets his sloppy seconds. And this has nothing to do with the girl. This is the kid. I mean, that cop just had his dick in her, and he doesn't care. He's going to go get some. And then when he's done, his other friend's going to go. And it's all like a bonding moment for them. That's something like the music swells and stuff. Like, we're now, Max is gone for his turn. He's already done. He's finished because like a lot of first timers, boom, bing, bang, boom, he's done. Wham, bam, bang, man. So now he's over talking more to Fartface the cop while his friend goes over there and she's laughing at him because he's shy or something like that. And it's supposed to be like a whimsical moment. It's like, haha, we're really bonded. It just seems so fucked up to me, but I get it. I mean, that's how it was for a lot of people.
Best friends.
Yeah, best friends.
Yeah,
it's. I mean, it really slams home the whole old school idea of like, you know, guys of that era, particularly gangsters, which is, you know, women are objects. You know, we can, of course, we share them because we don't have any emotional attachment to them.
It's very off-putting to me, but yeah, I know other people probably they did similar things like that.
I mean, on the one hand, not too closely because I don't think I'm that much of a dick, but I will admit something here, and I think a lot of guys can. You can relate to the fact, at least I can relate to the fact, that he actually has feelings for Deborah. Like, he likes Deborah. I don't know if he loves Deborah. And she's like the long-term plan. But he doesn't have any problem with seeing Peggy as well. At least I can get a notch on my belt.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think I'm that disgusting, but I'm kind of close. Because I think I've been in situations where I've, like, maybe been with a girl, and I realize that, like, there's no future with this girl. And that, like, there's no, like, relationship going to happen. But it'll be okay for now. I mean, I can admit to that sort of thing. I'm not saying I've done that a million times or anything, but I mean, not nearly as bad as in the movie, though. Especially worse that they're also young. But again, typical of the era and stuff, and that makes good sense. But like I said, I really applaud movies that don't shy away from showing like sexuality in younger characters because it's true to life. It's real life. So it's another thing I appreciate about the movie. And it does have a point because it's just, like I said, establishing sort of that about Noodles. It shows that even when he's older, he's kind of still the same way, which is disappointing. But you understand, like, well, why would he have changed? For one thing, like, was he supposed to learn better by being in, like, prison for, like, 10 years or whatever? And the first thing he does when he gets out of prison is Max brings him a prostitute.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, that's how they always bond, is, like, using women for sex. That's how they bond. And then, of course, there's the later part where Max has now started dating the crazy nymphomaniac. And he's mad at him about something else, but he says, "What? Oh yeah, because so this is in the wake of raping Deborah. Deborah leaves, and that's when he first starts going to the opium dens. And it's a little confusing the first time you watch it, but then the second watch you understand. Okay, some time has passed. The whole point is, ever since Deborah rejected him and left, he's been kind of useless to the gang. He hasn't been around doing the work and jobs. He's been in opium dens and all that kind of stuff. And there's a part where Max is yelling at him about it. And he knows why. He knows it's because of Deborah. And he says, like, over a woman? And he's like, well, what's your deal with, like, no women? She's right here, isn't she? He goes, what, you want me to get rid of her? I don't give a fuck about her and stuff. And he's like, get the fuck out. And he just screams at her and she leaves. And, of course, it's all for show. And she kind of knows that she doesn't mind. So, again, it just sort of shows, like, how they value women on this. Like, I don't know if he knew for sure she'd leave or not, like, but in the moment it didn't matter. If she goes, because she's just, you know, some cunt or whatever, right? That's how he thinks. But that was played by actress Tuesday Weld, the character Carol. So that spins back to the job that they were hired for by Joe Pesci and Burt Young. So we know she's pretty much a nymphomaniac because Burt Young's character says like he screwed her. It's like, ugh, that's an awful image. Because they just meet her by happenstance, like at some period later when she's at the club. She doesn't look as good with the blonde hair, I don't think. But anyway, I know we're jumping around a bit, but I'm just trying to find a footing for more stuff. Besides, just I know we.
Yeah, I've always been grossed out by casual sex like that, and especially with a prostitute, I would never do that. But different time. They didn't know about things we know about now. So
No, but I mean, they do about some of it. Like like syphilis had been around.
yeah, let's all run a train on our best friend.
Yeah, it's a nice bonding moment for them all. So anyway, well, we might as well talk about that then, since we're might as well. Then we can leave it behind for good. So the other rape scene is actually Noodles raping this woman, because before she winds up with Max and stuff is okay. So the job they are set up for to rob diamonds all comes from Burt Young, who says that she was the wife of some guy,
right?
And they're the ones that actually told them, and she worked at this place that had the diamonds, so she was like their inside person, so they could get in. And she was just sort of going to act while they broke in and ordered the staff around and stuff to get the safe open. And she's yelling at them and screaming because she's trying to put on an act. And then when Noodles like grabs her, she like asks him to hit her because she's that kind of person. She's a nymphomaniac and she's all turned on by danger and stuff. And he's kind of annoyed by it. But she's like, God, to make it look good, hit me. And they're like, oh, what the fuck? Who cares? She wants to get hit her and stuff. So here's where things kind of diverge. I think Noodles had every intention of raping her. He thought, this crazy broad, I'm going to give it to her. So it was rape from that perspective. Like, he didn't care whether she consented or not. But it seems clear as you watch the scene that she actually really likes it and is putting on a big act. So you could say it's not really rape. It is consensual in a way. But you could still say that it's intention rape, because, again, I think if she was really resisting for real, he still would have done it. But it's pretty clear as you watch the scene and listen to the actress that she's actually really into it. So you could say the movie has, like, one legit rape scene and one, like, kind of rape scene. I don't know. Plus, there's not too many movies that have that kind of humor either, where they're finished, where the job is, they're about time to leave, and Max comes into the room, and Max is like, "You coming? We're going." It's like, "Yeah, I'm coming." And then they leave. But yeah, it's just through like luck that she meets them again. She's at their club, and she gets called back into the room. Of course, they're all wearing masks during the robberies. Like, you don't recognize them, so they put the masks on. She realizes it's them, and then of course, how are they really going to recognize? They all pull their dicks out, which is pretty funny because she never saw it. She never saw it, and then maybe that's why she guesses wrong. She does guess wrong, and then she winds up being with Max. But yeah, you hear like she's a total nympho. Like, she still was married to the banker, but like, one of the banker's kinks was like, what was it? Like, she'd take on like a bunch of guys, and he would like watch through like the door or something. Crazy stuff. And Max is like, this makes a good girlfriend.
Sorry, I got a little bit of news here. Tom Hanks and his wife have both tested positive for coronavirus.
Well, a famous person. This is the first thing I've heard about a famous person with it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's unfortunate. I mean, it's weird. There's so much misinformation flying around. It's hard to know what to believe and stuff. I mean, the good news is, while they're older, they're not old.
Right.
So it seems like they could probably shake it off and get through it. But I'm not going to speculate about health matters, because obviously it's not something I know much about. But yeah, it's the first time I've heard of like a high-profile person getting it. Yeah, the U.S. seems to really be having struggle. I'm not trying to say this because tomorrow I could wake up and find out that Canada's in a mess. But right now, Canada and Mexico are doing okay. That could all change like that. But
they're in Australia, and I know they've had a pretty bad go of it lately there. So
yeah, that's
that was on his Instagram page. He put that, so I'm assuming it's legit.
It sounds legit, yeah.
But
so
anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to derail you.
Here's hoping that all works out. I mean, obviously, I hope for anybody that has it, it'll work out. I know it's going to kill a certain percentage of people, and that sucks.
Yeah, definitely sucks.
I mean, I think it has like reached a legitimate pandemic level at this time, but we're in a much better position for it than we were a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of 1918, 1919 was the year of the Spanish flu, which killed so many people. Like, we just had World War I, which devastated a big part of the world. Then the flu came in and killed more people than the war did.
Yeah, honestly, we've been due a pandemic for quite a while.
Mm-hmm. And I've been, and since I follow hockey, and I mean, it's obviously other sports too, you hear about the people saying, what are the contingency plans for doing these things? They're talking about, playing in empty buildings and stuff. It's like, are we even going to have playoffs and things like that? Like, 1919 was also, until the lockout season of 04-05, which that was the only other time that the Stanley Cup didn't happen. It was because of that flu thing, Spanish flu of 1919. So that wiped out that.
So now,
but they're saying they're going to go ahead with the Olympics.
Oh, really? Yeah.
So they must feel like there's a handle on it.
Well, I mean, we're going to get warmer temperatures coming up, so that should definitely help the spread of it. So
yeah,
it's already warmed up. It was almost 80 here today, so that'll definitely help. But they've canceled Coachella. They canceled what did you say, Comic-Con? One of the Comic-Cons.
E3, the video game.
Oh, E3. That's right.
Yeah.
South by Southwest.
Yeah. They canceled the Women's World Championship hockey, which actually is supposed to happen here.
So all this public stuff. I mean, they're really going crazy, man. Like at the hospital, my father-in-law he's in a physical therapy right now. They're not letting people come in past a certain time. No children can come in, and we haven't had any cases here yet. So
yeah, there's nothing going on here at all. Nothing.
It's close though.
I think the only confirmed cases in Canada were in Ontario. There might have been one. There might have been one in British Columbia or something. As I said, I'm not trying to be smug about it because tomorrow I can wake up and find out there's a bunch of cases in Canada. But so far, it's been contained pretty well in Canada and Mexico. Yeah. I think there's only 7 cases in Mexico at the moment.
That's crazy.
But here's hoping things start to turn and get better.
Yeah, it's gonna do like it always does, run a course for a while and then peter off.
Yeah, I mean, we have seen things like this before: the swine flu, H1N1, even SARS to a certain extent. Nobody seemed to take SARS seriously when it happened. I remember people just constantly making jokes about SARS. Nobody seems to be making jokes now.
It wasn't big in the West, I don't think, was it? SARS?
Not really. But I remember there was a pretty big case of SARS in Toronto.
Yeah. SARS is another type of coronavirus.
Yeah, they're related.
So that's why, we're going to start calling this one the Wuhan virus instead of the coronavirus because...
I guess technically, it's COVID-19?
Yeah.
Something like that.
And it's... I mean, at least it's not like what MERS or whatever the one was in South America a few years ago. That one
Here, I'm seeing another tweet about it too from the Washington Post about Hanks and Rita Wilson testing positive.
That virus had like a 35% death rate.
Wow, that's pretty high.
Yeah. So I mean, people were saying conspiracy theories that it was like made in a lab and stuff, but
yeah, no.
Making in a lab.
The one thing that's giving people too much credit. People aren't actually capable of making that, as far as I know. Something like that is any sort of biological technology we have.
Wouldn't you make something more deadly if you were going to make it with a higher death rate? I mean,
well, there's all sorts of logistical reasons why it couldn't have been made in a lab or anything.
Right. Oh, do you remember that crazy cult in was it California somewhere in the 80s? They went out and put salmonella on the salad bars. They sprayed the salad bar. I forget the name of that group, but yeah. So kind of makes you wonder, But
see, that was the best they could do, right? Salmonella was. I mean, I'm not saying in the grand, it's not much of anything, right? But that was the best they could do. But these were people setting out to just kill random people. I don't remember.
And I think the one they had that they had sprayed was one that was really easily treatable with antibiotics. that's how they found out. That's how they traced it back to them. But no, what they were trying to do there was they were trying to time it to where people would be really sick on election day, so where they could basically get all their people in there and vote in their people. If people were too sick to go vote, they would, be able to, essentially take over the place.
Interesting.
There's a whole documentary on Netflix about them. It's really interesting. Can't remember the name of it, but yeah, really good stuff.
It's weird that Danny Aiello is in this movie playing a character whose name is Aiello.
I thought the same thing.
And that's actually, it's just a coincidence. Like, it was called Aiello before he was ever cast.
Wow.
So seems so weird.
That must be a popular Italian name.
He's one of he's not a police chief, but he's a police something. He's a higher up in the police who's trying to fight against prohibition and stuff. And
was it his kid?
They switch his kid.
Yeah, okay.
I think that's one of the funniest parts of the movie.
Yeah.
They go into the maternity ward or whatever and switch all the babies around, and they keep a list so they know how it is, and then they lose it. And I love their reaction. They're just like, "Okay,
it's that one."
I like what Max says. He's like, "Well, some will get the good life now." It's like now it's it's like realistic. Some will get the good life and some will get the shaft. Ain't that the truth? And they make Danny Aiello so unlikable too.
Yeah.
Because I realize he's supposed to, again, sort of be a typical authority figure of the time, but like he has like 4 girls and he hates that he has girls, and he's so excited that he finally has a boy. It's like, oh boy, and he screams at the girls that the boy is going to be the boss of them all because he's a man and better than them and stuff. It's pretty funny. Like, after me, he's the boss in the house. Oh boy, I can't wait to see his penis. Oh, he doesn't have a penis. What the fuck is this? Ah!
Where did his penis go?
He flips out. But yeah, there's some fun music being played while they switch the babies around and stuff. And once again, we get in where the dialogue where the nurse comes in onto her and obviously starts to threaten her when the music just plays over it. But yeah, I love that they just switch all the babies around. They're like, oh well. Well, it was like, I wish I was switched at birth. He's like, maybe you were. How do you know?
Right.
I guess nowadays they probably have better precautions about it. Some other way. Like this, they just put them in a room and put like a tag on them or something. They probably have some fail-safe nowadays.
I know they put something, it's on the umbilical cord that will set off an alarm if it's taken out of the hospital. I'm sure it's got the tag on the cord.
Holy shit. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, that's just like because they worry about people stealing babies?
Stealing babies, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I get that. But I mean, this movie, that they have a reason for switching the babies. It's just like, I don't think in most places you really have to worry about somebody just randomly. Somebody be like, I'll just switch the babies for fun. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it's probably happened or it could happen. I don't know. But anyway, you can say it's a serious thing, but I think it's pretty funny.
Yeah.
In the movie.
Yeah.
But of course, the movie being the period piece that it is, it has a very stylistic look to it. Reading some stuff here about like some of the things that influenced him visually, specifically some of the paintings time, even Norman Rockwell paintings, Edward Hopper, stuff like that. Some of the photographs of New York from back in the day. It's interesting. Scott Fitzgerald's novel The Great Gatsby influenced Noodles' relationship with Deborah. Well, I mean, I guess I kind of see it. In The Great Gatsby, he's in love with this woman, and it's true. He wants to get her by showing that he's like worth something in a way. Like the whole thing, all the wealth and stuff, it's all for her, and he's throwing all these lavish parties. Like he wants to show her that he's something, and I guess that's kind of what's going on in a way. I see a bit of a parallel there, I guess. Obviously, this has the gangster element to it, where he's a crook who wants to show that he's worthy. But anyway, a very good-looking film, as you might imagine. Really amazing sets and stuff. Some of it, of course, shot in New York, but the train station stuff was actually shot in Paris. The place where they do the exchange with Burt Ward and kill him is somewhere actually outside Montreal, the weird shipyard place. So I didn't know they had ships that big out there. I mean, Montreal's not on the coast. I mean, it's on the St. Lawrence River. I mean, I guess plenty of boats come up that river. Something I think about too much, but yeah. Sorry, I was just trying to look for something that I lost here. I mean, what's your history with this movie? When did you see it? And
Yeah, it's like I said earlier. I didn't see it until I bought this Blu-ray. Only just because it's a checklist movie you got to get.
Right, because you'd heard of it. It was like a big movie.
Right.
Right. Sergio Leone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's chock full of great actors. It's chock full of Oscar winners too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he really lucked out in that.
Mm-hmm.
I said getting Robert De Niro just at a time when De Niro was sort of like at the apex of his like fame, really.
I mean, it's kind of like the bridge between The Godfather and Goodfellas and Casino and stuff, because that's how you can tie Scorsese,
Pesci, De Niro.
Yeah, and it's like you said, Godfather 2. It kind of takes the same type storytelling methods.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
Jumping around.
Yeah, as far as those gangster epics go, this is my favorite of them.
Mm-hmm.
I like it the best. One of the reasons I like it more, and sometimes you could use this almost as a criticism, is this movie's sort of heavy on the melodrama, but I think it's good melodrama, so I really like that. Whereas, I mean, The Godfather has a bit of it, where something like Goodfellas or whatever, Goodfellas is just all about being edgy in your face. It's like, look at all these pricks. It's not really necessarily trying to be really emotional, which is fine. It's just not that sort of movie, but I like how emotional this movie is. It really is about the bonds of friendship, regret, and betrayal. And I know people are sick of me saying this, but another reason why I really like the movie the way it is with the flashbacks is because I love memory. And so much of this movie is about memory. And I love how the flashbacks are done. I love the transitions between time periods, and I love the use of music and things like that. The only one that's kind of weird is the one where he's like walking along and somebody throws a frisbee. Isn't that weird?
Mm-hmm.
I can't even remember if that's going between like 33 and 68 or 68 to 33. I can't remember which one it is, but I think it's from 33 to 68. Like somebody's like he turns around, somebody throws, and it's like somebody catching a frisbee. I'm like, that's kind of a weird one. All the others are really good.
When was the frisbee? 50s, 60s?
Yeah, I mean, it had to have been in. Well, I mean, I don't know when it was introduced, but it had to have been like the 60s that they were transitioning to.
And that beach, Beach Boys and those beach movies and all that crap.
Yeah. The beach stuff got big in like the early 60s. Speaking of stuff, I'm sure this existed, but you know how like a lot of those like 70s New York movies, especially exploitation ones, but not all of them, would have like the cool looking or the weird looking, where you'd have like a pimp with like the hat and the suit and the hose that are all done up. You see that in 1968. There's a shot where when he goes to the station and finds the money that has the down payment on it, that has the note that says like, this is what is it for your next job or whatever. When he's sitting down, there's like somebody there's one of those. There's a pimp with two like hookers walking by, and they look like total like jive like stuff. It's funny. I'm sure that's when 68 is close enough. But yeah, they look like just that stuff from like a Shaft movie or something. Like the hookers are all done up with like fishnets and stuff, and the pimp has like the suit and the hat. And I think he might have had a cane. I can't remember, but it's kind of funny because they're just in the background. But yeah, even the kid actors, because even what's her name?
Jennifer Connelly.
Jennifer Connelly, she would eventually win an Oscar, didn't she?
Yeah, I'm not sure for what. The House.
I can't remember for what, but she did eventually win an Oscar. Did she win Best Supporting Actress in A Beautiful Mind?
Could be.
That might be it. Which I love Jennifer Connelly, but that movie is crap. I don't like that movie at all.
Oh no, I don't either.
I think it's a really dumb movie. It had a lot of hype around it at the time, and then fell through.
I know she didn't win it for the ass-to-ass scene.
One of my favorite movies, Requiem for a Dream.
That is a movie I don't ever want to watch again.
I get that it's unpleasant. That's the only movie I like by that director.
Yeah, that's right. It's a great film. It's just, terrible.
Yeah, I can see that. And it ends that way. It ends on an everything is terrible note.
Don't do needle drugs, kids.
They're so glamorous. They're so appealing.
Oh.
Yeah. Apparently, actually, Martin Scorsese was involved in getting what's known as the restored version. Okay, so we talk about the director's cut, which is the European cut, right? Which is the cut we watched, which is the 229 vision. So apparently, yeah, that the newer cut that adds a bit more from 2012 is known by that name. And Martin Scorsese was involved in that. By this time, Leoné, of course, is dead. He was helping Leone's children get the rights, so it adds in 24 other minutes to get the full version, which would be a 269-minute version. So, yeah, if you get a Blu-ray or DVD that came out, I think, in 2011, no, that just has a 251 restoration, so this is getting confusing. I don't know. Anyway, I know that you can at least get an even longer version from like the latest DVD or dubbed the extended director's cut. Came out in 2014. Okay, yeah, so that's what it is. Oh man. So yeah, the very first time you got to see like the version we saw was a 2-disc special edition that came out in 2003, featuring the 229-minute version of the film, the version we're talking about. The special edition was re-released on DVD and Blu-ray in 2011.
Right.
But nothing was changed to it.
Right.
So here's the change. 2014 was when they came up with the 251-minute cut, which is what I've been talking about. So yeah, so this 269-minute cut that Martin Scorsese helped with, I don't know, does that mean it's still ongoing, that they're eventually going to... They premiered at the Cannes Festival and then pulled from circulation pending further restoration work. So it sounds like that version might still be in the works for a home release at some point, the 269-minute version. So that's interesting.
Yeah. Just trying to find another way to get money out of this film that they butchered to begin with.
It was Gene Siskel that actually had said that thing about the worst and best.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
Gene Siskel considered the uncut version to be the best film of '84 and the shortened linear studio version to be the worst film of '84. And as we said, the '80s was really when Siskel and Ebert and other people were really starting to... This was really becoming a topic, talking about like films getting like cut up and messed up. And so Ebert's quote is pretty on the nose, but it makes sense, where he says... He calls the uncut version an epic poem of violence and greed, but described the American theatrical version as a travesty. So there you go. Which I totally agree with.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. The Untouchables came out a few years later, which was, of course, another Prohibition era gangster type movie. Although that just stayed in there, whereas this movie, Prohibition era gangster stuff, is the crux of the film, but there's other stuff going on we see before and after.
Who directed that?
That's De Palma.
It is, okay.
I like that movie, but if it's another one of those movies where I feel like they're not really trying. Like, they only go so far with some of the stuff, like silly window dressing, or De Palma's just like, okay. For one thing, he got an actor that I don't think can do anything as a lead role, and that's Kevin Costner. For the other thing, they have, just because De Palma, and I know, like, I like De Palma a lot, although I don't like his gangster stuff. Like, he's a big Hitchcock fan, obviously, and he ripped off Hitchcock in a lot of his movies, most notably like Body Double and stuff. But I think that's a really good movie, though, so I don't mind. It's a good ripoff. But sometimes directors get so self-indulgent that they have a scene or something from a movie that they just want to recreate for themselves. And so he does that in Untouchables, right? That whole scene with the baby carriage going down the stairs, which I think is from, what is it, Battleship Potomac or whatever, that Soviet film, silent film. Like, he just stuck that in because he wanted to. It has nothing to do with the plot or anything. He just wanted to throw that in. I know some people don't mind, but I kind of mind. Anyway, that's a fine movie. It comes on TV a lot. I watch it, but I don't think it's anything special.
Yeah, I don't either.
Obviously, in terms of quality, if you want to compare it to this film, I think it's crushed by this film. Anyway. This movie always makes it really high on lists of gangster films. Of course, it does not. It gets beat out by Godfather and Goodfellas, which I understand. But as I said, personally, I like it more than those movies. And that's not some sort of knock on those movies, because I think those are all also really good movies, obviously. But I just really like this story. I love the music, and I like 20th century period pieces. I like moving through the eras and stuff. And it's an interesting story. And so what we get here, of course, is so in 33 he's left town forever. He has to get the hell out of town. The syndicate is hunting him. The money from the locker has been taken, and his friends are all dead. So for about 35 years, he's in hiding in Buffalo. That's not even that far. Like, I'd like to think that he went somewhere beyond Buffalo. Yes, we never find out, because originally when he's leaving, they're just like anywhere, and they're like, how about Buffalo? He's like, sure. I hope that like Buffalo was just the first step on a longer journey. So like think that he's just been in Buffalo all this time, which just seems ridiculous to me, because it's really close. I mean, it's not that far
Right.
from New York City. To think, well, so what? The syndicate, they're looking for him. They want to kill him in Buffalo. Like, that doesn't seem right to me. But anyway, they never say. So maybe he could have traveled the whole time. Well, anyway, now he's back, and he meets Fats, and they talk, and he reminisces and stuff. And then, of course, the whole thing is when he goes to the graveyard to see their graves, and he finds out like this big monument's been made to them in his name, which is weird because he didn't do that at 67. And then he goes to the bus station, to the train station, to the old locker, and now there once again is a briefcase full of money, but he has no idea why. And the money, and there's a note on the money that says like, this is a down payment for your next job. And then this is where the movie has to like get a little clunky, but there's no helping it. Where like we see footage on TV of them talking about this Secretary of Commerce guy and how he's like embroiled in some sort of scandal. Well, when you see a movie, that's not just there for no reason. That's got to mean something. That actually has to have some bearing on the plot. And they don't really make it too hard to figure out that, okay, spoilers, people, that Max did not die that night. That Max faked his own death, and we will get into the details of this because it's more complicated than it sounds, and then decided that he was going to get in with the politicians and work with them until he rose up and became one of them and became a powerful one, although, again, crooked as hell. And now, after 30-some years, he's built this great life of power and influence and money, and it's all going to blow up in his face because people are going to testify against him for dirty dealings. And the whole thing is, he's the one that obviously he's the one that made the thing in the graveyard. He's the one that sent Max the money. And the job he wants Max to do is to kill him. Everything's going to blow up in his face. And you can see why he thinks this is somewhat the right thing to do and also somewhat poetic. He wants a way out. He wants to die. He doesn't want to go down and he's ready to die. And he figures he owes it to Max to let Max kill him for revenge because he's completely trashed Max's life and betrayed him. And that's what this is all leading up to, as a confrontation between them. And it's not too hard to really put that together. I think you can figure it out through the movie pretty early on that probably Max did not die that night. And then once you hear about this stuff, you're like, okay, it's definitely him.
Well, think back then how easy it would be to fake your death, too. They probably didn't even check dental records or anything.
Well, part of it was because the cops are in on it.
Sure.
This is where I'm talking about how it gets more complicated. Because you also have to take into the repercussions of this and think about what he really did. So this all comes from, let's go back. When they find out the prohibition, or no. So after they somewhat reconcile after that big fight about the woman or whatever, Max, of course, hasn't really dumped Claire, or no, not Claire, whatever her name is. Has not really dumped her, and of course, being in the line of work that they're in and being the kind of guy he is, it's not hard for Noodles to wind up with a new girlfriend. So he's got a new girlfriend, the one we saw get murdered in the opening scene.
Right.
And they go on a vacation to Florida. And apparently, even in the 30s, Florida was this goddamn crowded then as it is now. Even before they had Disney World and Universal Studios, everybody went to Florida because they're at this resort or whatever, and it's just full of people. Ugh. Anyway, and that's where they find in the paper, the prohibition's about to end and they're going to be out of a job. And this is where they start to discuss what their future should be. And this is where Max shows them that he's always had this dream of robbing the Federal Reserve, which of course would be insane. And he tells them that he's crazy. But you shouldn't use crazy because crazy is a trigger word for Max. And we'll find out that's because Max's father, who we never see, was crazy and died in a mental institution. So that was always trigger word for Max. So at this point, Max's girlfriend is worried about what he's going to do, with or without Noodles, because she said he'll do it even without you. And so she comes to him and they cook up the idea, well, there's going to be a minor job we have to do, bring in some more, because the law isn't in yet. Prohibition's still in effect at this point. They're going to, bring in a shipment or whatever like that. If we can rat him out to the cops, I'll go to jail with him. We'll all go to jail. We'll get caught during it. It'll only be for about a year and a half. And that'll be good. It'll save his life. It'll cool him off and get him off this stuff. And that's what the plan is. You find out later that this is actually a crazy Batman gambit, or maybe it's a Xanatos gambit. I can't remember the difference between the two. By Max, is that Max planted the idea in the first place to her, so she'd tell him. She wanted him to set him up, because he had a better idea for this. Because he had this whole thing, this deal with the cops, whereas we'll get in a shootout. It'll be like I instigate a shootout, so you have to kill me, but I won't be there. I'll send somebody else. But the whole thing is, again, how devious he is, because not only is he betraying him, he's betraying his other two friends. He's getting them killed. He doesn't care. They're just pieces on his chessboard. So those other two friends, or two friends, that they've had all this time, are just going to go down, or just going to die, just so that he can get away with this. So that's another part of the deviousness and, I guess, evil of Max's character, really, when you think about it. So, and of course, and the other thing is, the cops will be in on it, so they'll make sure to just figure the body that's supposed to be mine, and the records will say that it's mine. So that's the whole scope of it. And then I'll move on, and I'll create this new life. And I don't even know really what he thought about Noodles at that point, because the one thing that I never could understand is the movie opens with people from the syndicate hunting him down for doing this, because all they know is that, I guess, maybe. Does this mean that Max planted that? Did he leak it? Did he let them know that, through, obviously not through himself, because they think he's dead too, right? Okay, let's tie this up. I'm just gonna gather my thoughts here. So it's supposed to be a night where Max and the friends, including Noodles, are going to bring in a shipment. The plan that Noodles thinks is happening is that he's tipped off the cops. That's the whole phone ringing at the beginning thing. Remember, you have this whole thing where the phone keeps ringing, but it's not really ringing because it's ringing in his head. That's the phone call he's making to tip off the cop, Halloran or whatever like that. He thinks his plan is, I'll tip off the cop, we'll get arrested, we'll go quietly, we'll go to jail for a while. That'll cool things off. The bigger plan behind that is that Max is the one who gave him the idea in the first place, and that Max is actually not going to be there, and that Max is going to make damn sure that the cops kill the people that are there, and that they think that it's him. Okay, so for that far. What I want to know is, this happens with Noodles not being involved, but what Noodles hears is that, Max started shooting, and that's why they died. It's like he wanted to die, so Max is the one who started shooting. That's why it turned into a big fuck up. Okay, but what do the syndicate, who are separate from them, but who do business with them, know? Does this mean Max, through some third party, just tipped them off and said, hey, that whole thing that went down where Max and the other guys got killed? That was Noodles. He set them up. He told the cops. He snitched. Or did they find out some other way? In any case, the syndicate's hunting him, and they kill his girlfriend, and they're gonna kill Fats, and they're gonna kill him, but he managed to get away. I've never understood how they knew. I don't know if that meant Max tipped them off through some way, or if that was happenstance. Was Max's plan for him to get killed by the syndicate?
Why does he want to get killed so badly?
Well, Max actually doesn't want to get killed, right? That's the whole point. They think he has a death wish. And that's what they believe, because they say, oh, that's why the job went bad. You tipped off the cops showed up, but instead of going quietly, Max started shooting, and that's why it turned into a clusterfuck and why everybody got killed. And they think, oh yeah, Max had a death wish. The whole point is Max doesn't have a death wish. Max says, not even involved, not even there. There's a whole plan to fake his death so he can, move forward and consolidate power and blah, 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 right? But they believe he has a death wish, and maybe that's part of the whole thing. That's why you can't really know if that whole thing about robbing the Federal Reserve is real or not. Like, maybe that's another part of the thing to plant to make it seem like he was suicidal, right? The only part of the, like, I understand the whole plan mostly, except I'm not sure what he thought was supposed to happen to Noodles. Did he want Noodles to get killed, too? Did he want Noodles to flee town? Did he know the syndicate would try to kill him? And did he just figure, oh, Noodles can outmaneuver them and he'll run away? Like, I'm not sure if he just meant for Noodles to go into hiding like he did, or if he really meant for Noodles to get murdered. In any case, either way, it's bad. And it did, like, fuck everything up. And you understand why there'd be hatred. And that's the whole thing, is like, he's expecting, you know, him to come and meet him and definitely want to kill him. And yet, we find out, for all the flaws that Noodles has and everything he's been through, he doesn't want to kill him. And it's not just because that's what he wants. I mean, what Max wants. It's because, like, he's, as far as he's concerned, and he makes that very clear, he tells us, because the whole thing is, right, when they finally meet, he never calls him, you know, he never calls him Max or anything like that. He keeps up the pretense that he's secretary, whatever. He calls him that multiple times. And then he just says, you know, my story's a lot less complicated than yours, and that's that I had a great friend and he died. And that's how he chooses to see it.
Yeah.
Which I understand. Yeah, it's hard to know if you would do the same thing in his thought. You're like, yeah, hell yeah, I'm going to kill you after what you did. Not just to me, but our own friends.
Why does he want Noodles to kill him at the end?
As I said, he wants Noodles to kill him because this time he really does want to die. In 1968, he does want to die. Everything's come down around him. They're closing in. He's going to get dragged through the mud and go to jail. He doesn't want to do that. And he figures this is a neat way to do it because he figures Noodles would want to kill him anyway. And he does still think of Noodles as his friend, even though he did all that. So he's like, this will be right. This will be balanced. I'll get to die like I want, and Noodles will get his revenge like he deserves. And of course, Noodles throws a wrench in it because he doesn't want revenge. He just wants to forget about it and just move on and think, you know, you're not my friend. My friend died. My friend didn't betray me. My friend died. And then, of course, you want to talk about ambiguity. There's the whole thing where he refuses to kill him. They go down to the street and the weird shit with their garbage truck. What happened there? On the one hand, you could say it seems pretty clear that Max threw himself into the garbage truck and killed himself because you see him approaching the garbage truck. Then when the garbage truck comes further up the street, Max is nowhere to be seen. So if he's doing a weird fake out, he must have run really fast. But the other thing is they make a point of showing the weird part with the turbines turning in the garbage truck, and there's no blood or anything. There's no trace of Max at all. So I really don't know why they feel the need to be ambiguous there. Like they want to leave it up to us about whether or not he lived. But I mean, the whole thing is whether he lived or died there, and we don't know. If the movie were to keep running, Noodles would eventually find out, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
Because I mean, the death of this guy would make news. So if he died, he'd find out, and if he didn't die, it would be in the news that that weird hearing or whatever was still going on. So it's not like by not telling us, it means that like, oh, you know, Noodles will never know. It's just telling us we'll never know, which is kind of annoying. So I don't know. Because it seems to contradict itself. It seems to be very clear that definitely that's what Max did, because there's no other way he could go. But then they show that there's no blood or anything. So I don't fucking know. I find that a little annoying. As much as I like the movie, I find that little bit at the end a bit annoying. So I'm like, don't be ambiguous there. Make a decision. Go one way or another. Because you're showing two contradictory things. They can't both be true.
Right.
Because I looked really hard the second time I watched. I was like, okay, there's no blood, but maybe I can see some of the clothing or something, some hint, but there's nothing. It's just all plant stuff. Also, during their meetings, this is in his big house during a party. They're up in a private room. And you get to hear Yesterday again, although it's a different arrangement this time. And you also get to hear some other interesting contemporary American music, or somewhat contemporary. I don't know if you caught this. Did you notice Summertime being played on the trumpet?
I did.
Yeah, from Porgy and Bess. Yeah, Summertime and the Living is Easy. I thought that was neat. It seemed to really capture the feel of that party they were at, so I like that. But yeah, music plays such a big role in this, and not even just like the music that we hear, just like the music the characters hear. Because remember how when they're kids, and the whole thing is like he would spy on Deborah through the hole in the bathroom when she would do her dance practice. And she even makes the joke later, like she tricks him, right? She turns it on so she can catch him going in. And she says, you know, that song works like X-Lax. Every time I put it on, you have to go to the bathroom, right?
Huh.
But remember when they have their first reunion, when he gets out of jail and he comes down to the club, is that Fats goes up to the band. There's a band there, and he cues them and tells them to play that song, which I think is pretty funny. So when they have their reunion, that song is literally playing again. Because Fats made them. So that's a nice little touch. They even commented on something like that. It's like Fats always knew or something. I don't know. Something like that. You feel bad for Fats. He's a pretty sympathetic character. I mean, he's a criminal too in a way, because like his club, he runs the club or whatever, and that's doing all the illegal business. But still, he's not like killing people. He's certainly not betraying him. Never we trusted him so well. He's the one that had the key to the locker, right? When they made their pact or whatever, none of them were supposed to have the key. They would keep the key with Fats because they could trust him. But of course, at some point later, Max either busted into the locker or made another key because he's the one that made off with the money to help fund his new life. I mean, there's such a big movie. There's still other stuff we haven't talked about.
Sure. So what do you think about the theory that it's all an opium dream?
Right. So the movie begins and ends in 1933 on the night of the big thing going down and Max's supposed death, and it begins and ends in there. And when it ends on Max, huffing in some of the opium, and the screen, and it finishes with him like grinning, right? And some people have said, and I guess Leoné said it was valid interpretation, that all the stuff in 1968 of him being like an older man who went on that all that's in his head, that he just imagined it all. I don't know. I mean, as you said before, it just seems like a cop-out, like to think that like stuff you watched didn't really happen.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, it's weird too. It's a really weird thing for him to think up too. So he's just imagining that his friend is like a crazy guy that betrayed him, faked his death and betrayed him. Why would he imagine that? Up to 1933, he and Max have had his problems. That's why they came to this whole thing where he's like, I'm going to get him arrested and get him to cool off. But they're still friends, and he still likes him. That's why. He cares about him. He doesn't want him to die. So to think that he has some sort of drug-induced dream where it's like 30-some years later, and it turns out that Max has actually faked his death and fucked him over in the worst way possible. Oh, yeah, because the other thing, as part of it, too, is that all those years, even though they didn't get married or anything, he's been with Deborah, right? Because before he goes to the party, he gets confirmation, not directly from her. He goes and meets Deborah, right? And it's Deborah that says that hints that, she's been living with this guy, this Secretary Bailey. And then it shows that he's got a son. And then when you see the son, it's played by the same actor that played the young Max. So that really cements it, right? It's like, okay, clearly Max is alive, and that's his fucking son, which might be her son. It's not really explained. It could be her son. If it is, the son himself doesn't know it because he calls her by name, doesn't call her mother. He calls her Deborah. So that's left ambiguous, which I don't mind that they leave that ambiguous about whether or not it's actually, But in any case, whether or not they were romantically involved, because that's the other thing about when he's goading him, trying to get him killed. It's like, not only did I steal your money and get your friends killed and all this stuff, I stole your girl too, right? Like that's supposed to be the big one. And he says, yeah, you've been living with him for all these years. I know you have. But yeah, the idea that all the 60s stuff is imagined is, I don't want to tell people if they want to. If that enhances someone's enjoyment of the movie, fine. But it wouldn't enhance mine. To me, it would make it silly. So to me, no, it all really happened. Speaking of that final shot, right? So it freezes on him, like taking the huff on the thing, and then he grins, right? So then the credits start to roll on that shot. Did you know that never fades? Because you know how sometimes they do that in a movie, but eventually it goes to black and you see the credits? That doesn't fade. I watched the entire credits.
So it just goes.
The entire credits, it's him going.
Wow.
it didn't really feel like much of a big deal to watch the entire credits. I just watched a movie that was 3 hours and like 49 minutes long, so sitting through the credits didn't seem like a big chore. So I did sit through the credits, and yeah, and that was part of it. I was like, is it going to fade to black? Is it ever going to change? Nope, it stays on his face the entire time, right to the end. Good job, I guess.
I wonder if the other director's cut had any additional things in the ending.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything about the ending. Like, I've heard some small things. Like, again, I'm pretty sure there's at least a few more scenes with Joe Pesci's character. Okay, here's my question. This is, again, me being bad with faces. I don't even remember. When they are at the hospital in the 30s, and they're screwing around the babies and stuff, there's a part where when they leave, there's a man standing by the elevator who looks at them, and the camera stays on him. I'm almost positive that's Joe Pesci. Was it? Because it seemed like there was no reason for the camera to stay on this character. And I was like, it looks like him, but I can't tell because I'm really bad. Because Joe Pesci, I'm not used to seeing young either. So I don't know. But there's a shot. There's a shot when they're leaving the hospital of this guy being near the elevators watching them. And the camera stays on him for a couple beats, which seems to suggest that, yes, this is Joe, and they're going to have more dealings, but it never gets picked up again. Also, there's a scene, there's an extended part to the scene where in 1968, when he goes to the cemetery, I guess before he goes up to the big, I don't know what it is, but the big thing that has the grave in it. What's the word for those things? Anyway, before he gets there, I guess there's there's some sort of female funeral director he has a conversation with. So that's another deleted scene or whatever.
Mausoleum? Is that the word you're looking for?
Yeah, mausoleum. Thank you. Yeah, before he gets there, I guess he has a conversation with some woman who I guess is some sort of funeral director or something like that. Wait, it's in here. It's on here on. In the 2012 restoration, Louise Fletcher appears as the cemetery directress of Riverdale, where Needles visits his friend's tomb in 1968. So yeah, so whoever Louise Fletcher is, she gets a part of the scene. So that's another added thing. So I did find a little bit things, some of the little things. But there's almost, from what I've read, there's almost certainly some more stuff with the Joe Pesci character, some stuff about their dealing with the mob. It never gets done. I guess I don't mind that there isn't more. Like, it's a long, full movie. There's plenty of stuff in it. Like, I don't feel like you need it. I'd be interested to see it if it exists, though.
Sure.
But, okay, so when you said you think it's long, but then you said you actually were a fan of a lot of the long takes or the music takes over. So that's not what you would cut. So what's some of the stuff you would cut down on?
As far as what I would cut to make it shorter?
Just to make the runtime a little tighter.
Not a whole lot, actually. Maybe just some of the lingering shots, and I really would just rather it be 2 movies than cut any of it.
Right. I mean, if I had to make cuts anywhere, I would probably say in like the 1918 stuff, there's some of that you could shorten. If I'm being like, I'm fine with all of it. I'm fine with all of it, no problem. But I'm just saying, if I had to, I think that's the section that I would cut more. Some of, because some of that does not necessarily serve too much of a narrative purpose, or at least how long some of it take. I'm not saying cut out any of the scenes. I'm just saying some of those scenes could be shorter.
Sure.
Okay, so we are missing a big tragic part that's part of his character and his backstory. Of course, is how things end in 1918. So we'll do a little explanation, although, again, we're not supposed to really say what the movie is. Just tell everybody what the movie happens. But okay, so after the whole thing with the cop, they have plans now. They're going to expand. Even though they're still kids, they're going to move up and do stuff. And they get involved with some of the local criminals. And they have this thing, these are guys that are smugglers, and they smuggle things in on the harbor or whatever. And they have this problem where if the Coast Guard comes by, they have to dump the stuff, so they don't get caught. They have to dump it overboard. And, of course, then they lose it. So some of the kids, the gang with Noodles and Max and everybody, they have this thing where if you tie, a thing full of salt to the stuff you throw over, the whole thing it'll sink. But eventually the salt will dissolve, so then it will come back up and you can get it. So that's sort of they're in, and that's one of their bonding scenes. This is where they go out to get work, and he and Max. They're trying to fish it out, and they both fall in the water together. Haha, another bonding scene. Yeah. What would you do without me? Okay, fine. One thing they flash back to later, towards the end of the movie, when they show like a montage of like him, him and Max's friendship, which I guess is better than showing him like smiling while like he fucks Peggy over there. But anyway, so the whole thing is eventually this bothers like the guy that like the small time guy that like controls stuff. There's that Bugsy guy, and it makes Bugsy so mad that he decides he's going to kill them. I guess his plan is he's going to kill all of them. This guy is like totally prepared in broad daylight to like murder like 4 teenage boys.
Yeah, how many bullets in that gun, Bugsy?
I don't know, but I guess that had to have been his plan, right? Unless his plan was just to kill one to send a message. Because that's another thing. Earlier in the thing, Bugsy already sets his men on Max and Noodles and beats the shit out of them. But right. they don't listen and they go ahead with the other stuff. So anyway, so after they have their first meeting where they make the whole decision, because the whole briefcase thing actually goes back to when they're kids. We've rented out this locker at the train station. We're going to put a briefcase in it, and 50% of everything we earn will go into the briefcase. We're going to plan for the future, and they all agree to it. And the whole idea is that Fats will have the key. Then they're also happy, and as he tracks them down, and he shoots the youngest one fatally, and of course he dies like right in Max's arms. So that's not Max, right in Noodle's arms. So that's a big part of his growing up. Is that there were, like I said, there were 3 others, and it was down to 2 because the third, and of course that's what led to being in jail. He manages to get the drop on Bugsy, knocks the gun away, stabs it a bunch of times. 2 cops show up to stop him, and in his rage and confusion, one of the cops grabs him. He stabs that cop too, although probably not fatally, and that's why he goes to jail for so long. Because you could say, self-defense against Bugsy, but then he like stabbed an officer of the law, so he's in jail for like 12 years, something like that. So anyway, it is worth pointing out. Yes, that's another big part of his character is that, as a kid, he had one of his friends murdered right in front of him, and then had to kill them. And it's a pretty good scene. The kid does a pretty good job. I mean, it's just a death scene, but he says something like "Noodles, I slipped" or something, and then dies. Very tragic. And he talks about that later. He talks about that when he's on that date with Deborah before he rapes her. He mentions that. But yeah, that's the time period where if I had to make any cuts, I think you could probably speed up some of that 1918 stuff and not make it quite as long. Again, I love the movie. I'm not going to change it. Hell, I'll add more scenes. But if you're going to like make it run a little smoother, I could say you could probably cut out some of that stuff and it wouldn't hurt it too much.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny because like the length of a movie is such an issue. Because you really have to walk the line of telling a full, detailed story, and also like, just being way too long to hold people's attention and things like that. It is a difficult line to walk, and we live now in an era where like a 3-hour movie is like suicide, and even then it was kind of considered like a bad idea, which is why they cut the shit out of it, which actually backfired and made it way worse. But I mean, I can even think of like a recent movie, and I mean a recent like mainstream movie. I don't mean, I mean like a mainstream movie that's been in theaters. It was, I don't know, it was over 3 hours. Like what's the most recent one?
The movie was over 3 hours?
I mean, Avengers Endgame was about 3 hours.
What was Once Upon a Time in Los Angeles?
Oh, Hollywood?
Hollywood.
It wasn't 3 hours. It was the usual almost too long that Tarantino does, where it was definitely well over 2 hours, but it wasn't 3 hours. It was maybe 240, something like that. So that's another thing. So yeah, so Tarantino had been on my mind recently too, leading into this movie, because I'd watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I saw it in theaters, but at the end of this month it'll become available on a movie channel, I guess. So I'm going to watch it again, but. Recently, I watched The Hateful Eight, which had me thinking about 2 things. It had me thinking about Tarantino, or a few things. It had me thinking about Tarantino, it had me thinking about Westerns, and it had me thinking about this movie because of the connection between the scores, the same composer.
Hmm.
And it just made me think that, I've never been a big Western fan, but there are some very interesting ones, and I think that definitely on this show we'll get around to one or two. Like maybe not a well-known one, maybe something more off the path. Again, I was going down sort of a rabbit hole reading about the revisionist one. There's one that sounded really interesting to me called Soldier Blue that would have fit right into the new Hollywood era because it was part of that thing. It's like from 1968 or something like that. It actually has Candice Bergen in it, and somebody else, but Loomis is in it too.
Donald Pleasance.
Donald Pleasant's in it. Anyway, it's like based on a true story about like a massacre that really happened, and
what was the name of it again?
It's called Soldier Blue.
I don't believe I've heard of it.
It was super violent. It was like the most violent Western ever made at that point, because it was different too, and it fits into Western because like. It was the type of film that really, not just because it was violent, but it made people mad because it really showed like Americans as bad guys. Because like it ends with like American soldiers like massacring all these Indians and stuff, which is based on a real massacre too. But it's also problematic too because if it's supposed to be a movie that's supposed to like show like the plight of like the Indians during this, like it's problematic because they're kind of just served up to die, and the main characters are still white Americans because Candice Bergen is one of the main characters and some other guy. Anyway, and she calls him Soldier Blue. Anyway, it's so violent that it's actually been sometimes accused of being an exploitation film. So anyway, it sounds really interesting. So that's one of the things that's on my mind is maybe not necessarily doing that, but doing something like that. Plus, this movie is called Once Upon a Time in America, which is, I think, he was totally justified doing it because he's the guy that came up with the Once Upon a Time movies with Once Upon a Time in the West, which is really great. But I always think of the Once Upon a Time movies as like a family, even though they're not related. Once Upon a Time in China is really good, and they made a sequel to that. Once Upon a Time in Mexico is probably the least good of the movies. I enjoy it, but it's not like all these other Once Upon a Time movies are like sort of serious, ambitious movies, whereas Once Upon a Time in Mexico is just like Robert Rodriguez having fun, which is fine. I like the movie, but Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I can't say Once Upon a Time. I sound Once Upon a Time. I'm going Once Upon a Time. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. You still haven't seen it?
No, I'm going to remedy that soon, though.
Yeah, you'll probably like it a lot more than I did.
Probably so.
Because I mean, and I know this is where it comes down to personal taste and stuff too, about when directors are being self-indulgent. I mean, obviously, Tarantino is self-indulgent in most of his movies when it comes to this or that, and most of us don't care because we like the same things he likes. But this is him at like maybe his most self-indulgent, and it's gotten to a point where I don't find it cute or entertaining anymore. I just find it annoying. So there's like it's not like a bad movie to me. I don't think it's bad. It's not like it has terrible things in it, but nothing about it endears me either. Except that yes, it's a good recreation of the time period. Like they do a good job of historical accuracy as far as the way things looked and sounded and stuff like that. And they came up with some good actors for some like lookalikes, like the guy that looks like Manson looks like Manson. Although I guess that's not hard. All you have to do is get a guy who's about 5'7", 5'8", give him long hair and a beard, and there you go.
Crazy guy.
The crazy guy, and he's Manson. The guy that looks like Polanski looked like the way Polanski looked then. The actress looks a lot like Sharon Tate. She's not, was that Margot Robbie or whatever? She looked, I mean, decent enough. They got a guy that looked and did a pretty good job of the voice too of Bruce Lee. Although there's been some controversy about that scene. Family Bruce Lee saying this makes him look like a hot-headed moron. The scene does make him look like a hot-headed moron. And a lot of people didn't like the idea that Tarantino said that, well, yeah, this like 50-something stuntman could have beaten prime Bruce Lee is kind of ridiculous. And he even doubled down on it too. He's like, well, this guy was a soldier. So, like in a martial arts tournament, Bruce Lee would win. But like out in the jungle, this guy would win. Like based on what? Yeah, if he had a gun or a knife, I guess. This is just a pet peeve of mine because I like martial arts and, mixed martial arts and stuff like that. Like, do people think that these guys, what they're doing isn't real? Like, I'm not talking about Jean-Claude Van Damme doing spin kicks in movies. I'm talking about these guys that train to beat the shit out of each other in rings and stuff like that. Do you think there's something fake about that? Do you think that these guys that spend all their time punching and kicking and chokeholding and wrestling and squeezing and taking real blows and stuff like that, is there something fake about it that makes you think that if somebody was in the army, they're tougher than them? If you're in the army, you get training, yes, and part of the training you get, yes, is hand-to-hand combat. But it's a tiny, tiny part of your training. Do you think somebody in the army learns how to do a better kick or punch than like these martial artists? It's ridiculous. Anyway, hell, half of them are learning.
There's a certain
they're being taught by martial artists.
Certain number of guys that just think they're, the best ever. So,
because I mean, the whole point is, martial arts are great and stuff, but we live in the world where if you're a soldier, you're going to use it if you have the opportunity, but you have a gun and you have a knife, and that's what you train with. You do a bit of training. It's like, here's a chokehold, here's how to throw a guy down, here's a proper kick or punch. Okay, but most of your training is going to be how to use your weapons, because that's what soldiers do. They use weapons. So this idea that like some weaponless soldier is better than a weaponless martial artist is ridiculous to me. But for whatever reason, Tarantino doubled down on that, which I thought was ridiculous. This fictional stuntman who was a former soldier, because he'd been a soldier once and fought in Korea or something, could somehow beat prime Bruce Lee was ridiculous. Anyway, I'm sure you'll enjoy Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And I'm not going to talk any more about it. Another shows, and you and I have a conversation where I think the crux of the story, this weird retelling of the Manson murders by throwing, I think is weird. I think it's weird. Like, I don't think it's weird to do a movie about the time of slavery where a slave bounty hunter or whatever kills like a mean plantation owner. I don't think it's weird to make a movie about World War II where in this version of history, a group of commandos murder Hitler. I don't think that's weird. That makes sense. I get it. This is weird. The idea about a very specific murder that happened to specific people having involvement from these other characters, I think is weird. I'm not saying it's terrible, but I don't even know what made him think of it. It baffles me. But anyway, the best part about the movie is Leonardo DiCaprio, because he's just such a good actor and he does everything so well. And he's got some really great scenes. And I do like movies where like you see actors as actors. So you see like Leonardo DiCaprio acting a scene as an actor acting a scene. I like that. I eat that stuff up. I like that. There's some really good stuff about that. So there's definitely some good things in the movie, but I found a lot of it weird and a lot of it boring and drawn out. But anyway.
What about Once Upon a Time in China?
Really good. Like
it's
like right in the pantheon of like really good martial arts epics and stuff. The sequel's pretty good too. That's like the movie that kind of like saved Jet Li's career.
Yeah.
Because Jet Li was around in the 80s, but the movies he did were crap. But then Once Upon a Time in China really helped him. Yeah, I really need to see it again. I haven't seen it in a long time, but it's a really entertaining movie. It's loosely based on a real guy too. A 19th century guy. Can't remember his name, very famous martial artist. Obviously loosely based, but some truth to it. And they made a pretty good sequel too. There's a Once Upon a Time in China too that's also not great, but a worthy sequel, I would say. So yeah, as far as the Once Upon a Time movies go, I think they're all really good, with the weak one being Mexico. But at the same time, I don't pick on Mexico because they're not really trying to make like a big, really great, serious movie. It's just a fun movie with a lot of violence that I enjoy. I enjoy Once Upon a Time in Mexico. I saw it in theater. Really liked it. Back when Johnny Depp was actually entertaining. Go back a long way for that.
Yeah, I think they made 3 of those. Once Upon a Time in China's.
Okay, I didn't see the third, if there's a third. I did not see the third, so.
I believe Jet Li's in it, too.
Oh, yeah. He was also in another, or this is where it's weird. Also around the same time, these were more, he was in one, but there were 2 of them, fantasy martial arts movies called The Swordsman or something like that. He's not in the first one. He's in Swordsman 2, and that's the good one. The first one's okay. The second one's really good, and that one has Jet Li. Although it's different from a lot of martial arts because it's a fantasy martial arts, so there's like supernatural stuff going on.
Oh, yeah,
some people don't like that. I like that. I don't like it in everything. It all depends,
Yeah.
It's one of the really good ones though. If you're gonna like talk about like every other day, there's like some Chinese or Korean fantasy martial art movie coming out that pops up on Netflix. I'm like, I should watch that, and then I never do. Yeah. There's so many in the last few years. It's like White Dragon Princess and all this stuff. Like, that's probably good, or at least seems interesting, but I never get around to it.
Like House of Flying Daggers. Was he in that?
No, that one is shit. Who is that? It's not Chow Yun, or maybe it is. I own that movie, and I haven't watched it in 100 years.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
It's one that actually got a theatrical release here.
Yeah, didn't do well.
No.
Yeah, I remember we talked about this years ago on the Sausage Factory when we did a show about martial arts movies, because there was that very brief period in like the mid 2000s where it was like, it looks like these sorts of movies are going to make a comeback, and no, they didn't. Not that they weren't good, it's just, they didn't really land. You can understand it's kind of difficult to market some of those things, like House of Flying Daggers. That's a confusing title, but at the same time, I mean, everything's right. At the same time, I want to defend it and say, who cares? It's clearly a martial arts movie with like crazy action. What else do people need to know? But yeah, that was an interesting time. Hero, which had Jet Li, was around the same time. Hero's really good, and it's probably the most like artistic movie Jet Li's ever done. It has like a beautiful color motif to it. Really good.
No, that wasn't Jet Li and Flying Daggers. That was Andy Lau.
Yeah. Andy Lau is interesting because he's not technically a martial artist. He's just an actor who has done some martial arts training, and they put him in movies. But he's in some very good martial arts movies nonetheless. Andy Lau, I love him. He's like the Chinese Harrison Ford. Big fan of him.
What was the one that Jet Li did where it was a bunch of different like timelines and different like it was time travel involved and
The One.
That's it. Yeah.
You mean the one where it's like, yeah, so it's like a bunch of different universes, and this version of Jet Li realizes he can hop dimensions, and every time he kills his counterpart, he gets stronger.
That's right.
I saw that in theaters.
I did too.
I think Jason Statham's in that before anybody knew who Jason Statham was.
He did a movie with Jason Statham called War.
They did War, which is like awful. It's one of the worst movies of Jet Li's. It might be the worst movie of Jet Li's career, including the 80s stuff, and he did some bad 80s stuff.
I was a huge Jet Li fan around that time.
Oh yeah, I'll always be a big Jet Li fan.
I didn't know about Jet Li until I saw Black Mask, like in the late 90s.
Yeah, I own that movie too. It's weird. I think I've showed you before. I own a weird Jet Li collection that has like beautiful Blu-rays of Hero and something else, and Black Mask is on there, and it doesn't seem right. I'm glad to own it, but it doesn't seem like proper to be in with those movies because they're like really good movies, and Black Mask is just this silly thing. But it's fine. I mean, it's a fun movie, but it's it's basically a B movie is what it is.
But I watched like Black Mask, and then I went back. I had to go backwards and watch like The Legend and Once Upon a Time in China and stuff. Oh
yeah, it's the other one, Fist of Legend, which I've said many times is maybe to me it's like the second or third greatest martial arts movie ever. It's like right up there for me. I love it. Putting Legend of Drunken Master as number one, which is no surprise. It's what a lot of people have, which I still don't own. But it's on. Yeah, Jackie Chan.
Yeah, that's a great one. I love that one. That
end fight is, like widely considered like the greatest martial arts choreography ever done. It's still so hard to get unless I guess to get Region 1 versions of or good Region 1 versions of his movies. Like all the good versions of his movies aren't Region 1, which annoys the hell out of me.
Well, it's like they'll put them out, but they won't be like remastered or anything. They'll just be like the shitty like dubs, like the VHS dubs.
Yeah. I think there's some British ones that are good, but they cost a fortune, and they're British region.
Right. Which.
That's one of the things that's good about that. I mean, yeah, for some reason, like Jet Li's library is like easier to as far as quality goes. Over here, it's easier to get good Jet Li movies than good Jackie Chan movies. Like I can't go down to the store and get Wheels on Meals.
I'm sure this exists, but it would be a great idea to do like a streaming service for, just martial arts films.
Yeah. I mean, I got to give Netflix credit. They have a lot. If you look, there's actually a lot, but they're just missing a lot of like the really important ones, which bothers me. I own some of the important ones, although I'm not always happy with how I own them. But not Jackie Chan. I don't own any important Jackie Chan. Like, I own Fist of Legend, Jet Li. I own Hero, which is later but good. I actually own Oh, the Gordon Liu one, 36 Chamber of Shaolin.
Oh yeah, I've got that on Blu-ray.
Sweet. But I remember the video store that used to be here that was so great, Video Difference. Like they had a few for sale when the place was going out of business, and I was trying to time it so I get them cheaper, but I didn't get them because they had the 5 Venoms, but it was like $45 or something. I was just like, ugh, can't do it.
It's
But like right now on my Netflix, 5 Venoms is available. I don't know about yours, but
that's cool. There's so many films that I need to watch in that genre.
But it's the same thing with Netflix. Like there's no Jackie Chan on Netflix unless it's like post 2000.
Right.
Like like years and years ago, like when I had the American version. That's how I saw some of Jackie Chan's like better old films, and they've been gone forever. Like that's how I saw Project A 1 and 2, which are both really good. Well, 2's not great, but they're both really good. And Dragon Lord, which is an astonishing movie that like nobody's seen. It also holds the record. I'm sure I've mentioned many times. It holds the record for most takes for a scene ever. There's this whole opening scene that's just batshit crazy with like a whole bunch of people and they're like forming like big human pyramids and stuff. And like they did like, I don't know, like I can't even remember, it was 700, something insane.
What can I search? Just like Kung Fu?
Where are you searching?
On Netflix. I mean, like, there's not like a genre tied to that, is it?
Actually, it's funny if you go to Google or something like that, you can look up there's like categories have like number codes, and you can find them that way. Like things you've never like even heard, like would even consider, like really weird things. It'll be like dark, edgy. What's the word I'm looking for? What's that place in the world? Like Finland.
Norwegian?
Or like it'll be like Nordic crime. Like there'll be like a number code for that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, hold on, I'll find this.
And where do you enter that code?
I think that only, yeah, you're right. I think it only works if you look through, like if you're doing Netflix on your computer. But hold on, because you're right. I have no idea where you.
That's probably one of my biggest complaints about Netflix is the accessibility to finding stuff that's on their platform, because you can search for things and it won't, yes. You have to specifically search for that movie for it to come up for you. You won't see it like in a list if you look through the genre. Here's
something that I think would be easy they could do. I like the idea of how, one of the things about Netflix is there's just so much shit, right? But a lot of the shit is stuff you'll never watch. You'll never watch it, right? You should be able to click it and put it on a button and so that it disappears.
Maybe hide an entire genre of stuff,
Yeah.
Hide all like romantic comedies or something, so it doesn't. It's not flooding your.
Okay, here we go. Hopefully this still works. This is older. But yeah, they're genre codes. And they're just like 4 or 5 digit numbers. Oh, okay, this has been updated back in November. Okay, so this has been updated. Because I haven't looked at this in a long time, so that's cool. I'm still dealing with my dying laptop here, and the things are slow. Let's scroll. Yeah. Okay. So this just only has some. So here's some of the weird ones, like African movies, animal tales. This is just an A. Anime, sci-fi, art house movies, Australian movies, basketball movies.
Give me a code. Let's see if it works. Just like
give you a random code.
Sure.
Okay, let's see if you can find any Belgian movies. This is only 3 letters. It's 262. Most of them are longer, but that's short.
Oh no.
To manually explore categories usually hidden by the streaming device, you will need to enter the following, and then it gives like a netflix.com/browse/genre/insert number.
Oh,
then simply replace the insert number component with one of the codes.
So this is like a desktop. You have to do it on a desktop.
As far as I know. But yeah, there's like dozens of them.
That's cool to know, though. It's easily.
Oh yeah, and I mean it's crazy. Like deep sea horror movies has its own code.
That's cool. Why is this shit so hidden? Like, why is it not just? Why is that not something I can click on?
You know, foreign gay and lesbian movies. Not, and then, let's see. I mean, there's just so many Italian movies. Jazz and easy listening. Like, is that a movie? What the hell? Korean TV shows, Latin music. Yeah, and there is one for. Okay, the martial arts movies code is 8985.
I'm just putting it to the search field. That's not going to do it.
No, I can give you the thing. So if you're looking it up, you have to go to netflix.com. Oh, sorry, I have to scroll up again. You go to netflix.com/browse/genre/ then the number.
Let me try it now.
Yeah, most of the numbers are 4 or 5 digits, but there are a few shorter 3-digit ones.
Said the IP address could not be found.
This is fairly recent, so I don't know. I'm going to try it myself in a minute. I've just got too many things open.
Let me try it from the...
But maybe after we go off air, we can experiment. Because, yeah, I hadn't thought about that in a long time. But, yeah, like just like crazy specific genres are available, or at least were. Because I did do this. I did find stuff using my laptop, like not on my PlayStation or whatever. Because there is no place to put codes in on there, which is annoying.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, it works. I just did it.
Nice.
Return to the 36th Chamber is on there.
That's the second one.
As is Kung Fu Yoga.
Yeah, see, that's one of the newer Jackie Chan ones. Like, who cares? I know that's on there.
I still haven't seen Headshot, but I've heard that one's really good.
What is it?
It's called Headshot.
Oh, who's that?
Maybe Korean.
Okay.
I've never heard of any of these people. I can't pronounce the names.
Well, you know who I always talk about. That doesn't get, who was never really a star over here. Donnie Yen. I love Donnie Yen.
Yeah, I can think of his name.
I fucking love him.
He's getting a little bit. Wasn't he in the Star Wars movie?
Yeah, but I mean, that was when he was older. Sure. But I just mean like the movies where he was like an action star. And the difference is he never really came over. Actually, I told you. Remember? So he was like an action star throughout like the 90s and 2000s. He had one brief foray over here and then was like such a bad experience he came back. He was in Highlander Endgame in 94.
Wow. I saw it in the theater too.
Yeah, I didn't, but I had friends who were huge Highlander fans and they saw it. And they even tried to convince themselves it was good.
Yeah, I did the same. This is cool. Sorry, I'm just checking out this.
Yeah, I can give you I'll find the thing where it has the lists of codes. So
okay. It does like martial arts, but then it breaks that down into separate.
Oh yeah, there's like Eastern martial arts and all sorts of stuff.
Exciting historical. That's all the Crouching Tiger, Flying Guillotine.
Oh wait, that's no good too. I'll use Twitter.
Love Flying Guillotine. I didn't realize those were on.
Yeah, that's on there. Yeah, a couple of those old school 70 ones are on there that I haven't watched yet.
I like that, man. That's what I used to watch when I was a kid. Like they would have a certain day where that stuff would come on.
Yeah, that's cool. Like we never had that. I didn't have the channels that had that, like a weird like kung fu theater in the afternoon or something. Yeah, show. I never had channels that had that.
I want to say it may have been like WGN, a channel we get out of Chicago.
That's a channel I eventually did get, but it was probably after that stuff was over. Because that was a channel I did get for a while. At one point.
Like Bozo the Clown would watch that show. And then, of course, Cubs games were always on there. And then They would do like a movie
Yeah,
marathon.
there was a really brief period in like the mid 2000s where you could see Chicago Blackhawks games on that.
That's cool.
What's weird about that is like for like throughout the 80s and 90s, like you couldn't see those out of market because the owner Wirtz, like wouldn't allow it.
Oh, really?
The team was basically cursed while he was alive. Once he died, they got good and won cups. It's pretty funny.
Wow.
Bill Wirtz. He apparently was a real jerk. One of those really tyrannical owners with weird rules and stuff.
That wouldn't surprise me. I told you about the New Orleans Saints. Like the owner of the Saints wouldn't let the Saints games be broadcasted in New Orleans, like on network television. You had to buy a pay-per-view. I don't know if that's still the case, but that was at one time. Pretty crappy thing to do to your hometown. Yes.
God, yeah.
But so Kenny's asking if Chicago won tonight.
I have not been following. I've got too many things open already. I'm too scared to follow the NHL site right now. I've got too many tabs open.
My laptop's gonna blow up.
Yeah. By next week, I might have a new one.
Yeah, behind the curtain, guys. That's some of the problems we've been having, among many other things that have kept us from getting a show up in a month.
I know it's been.
So we're trying to get back on a regular schedule of some sort.
Yeah. Well, we're getting some of the daylight back. That always gives me more energy.
Yeah. Do you guys do daylight savings?
Yeah, that's what I mean. It just switched. We just did the spring ahead thing here, right? So
I'm just curious
because
I hate it so much, and I think it's so stupid. I wish
Saskatchewan doesn't do it. The rest of Canada does it, and Saskatchewan doesn't.
Wow, that's got to be hard to keep track of what time it is there if you're not living there.
That's one of the reasons why I'm good. There's two reasons why I'm good at time zones. One is because I'm Canadian, and Canada's a big country with a lot of time zones. And two is because of having involvement with like some various foreign people in like far away countries, so that I eventually like memorize time zones. But Canada is vast. So Canada has the Pacific time zone. It has the Western time zone that gets thrown off because Saskatchewan is part of that, but sometimes it is not part of it because it doesn't do the thing. It has the Eastern time zone, which is like Ontario and Quebec and stuff, and basically will be east coast of the U.S. And it has the Atlantic time zone, which I live in. But then it has the weirdest time zone of all, Newfoundland, which is the same thing as the Atlantic, only a half hour later.
Wow. That's weird.
Yep.
Why?
Just because of Newfoundland being further north and east.
Oh, wow, that's man.
So yeah, so for me, most things are done in like Eastern time. So for me, it's just add an hour on. 7 Eastern, okay, 8 o'clock. But if you're in Newfoundland, it's 8:30.
Wow.
Pretty nuts.
And so what's the span of hours, like from the earliest to the latest?
So if it's
4 hours?
If it's 4, so it could be 4.5, right? So
wow.
it could be 4 o'clock in the afternoon in Vancouver and 8:30 in Newfoundland. That's across Canada.
Yeah, I'm learning stuff all the time.
Yeah. The weirdest thing is, I have no idea why it works out this way, but Buenos Aires has the same time as here. It's the same time here now. It's almost midnight here, and it's almost midnight in Buenos Aires. I don't really know how that works. East and west is usually what determines it, but I guess north and south does come into it if you go far enough. But I mean, really, isn't it like, if it's like 8 o'clock in New York, isn't it the same time in Miami? Like, that's the same, isn't it?
I believe so.
Yeah.
It's all, the entire side there. Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. So to return to this movie before we finish off, it was Leone's final movie. He died a few years later. And so he didn't really get to live to see it get much acclaim besides like within, I guess, various critic circles, but not like he never really got to see it be like a big success, and he wasn't even alive, I think, for like the home release of it. It got released in '91. I can't remember if he was still alive or not, but it got released for like two. You could get it on like 2 VHS in '91, and I don't even think that was, and that's still not the European version or the thing. But obviously, it stands out for a lot of reasons from his career because most of his career was westerns.
Right.
Sometimes they say it's part of an unofficial trilogy called the Once Upon a Time films. Once Upon a Time in the West, Duck You Sucker, and Once Upon a Time in America. Why is Duck You Sucker part of Once Upon a Time? I don't know. Because it does have other titles, but they don't involve Once Upon a Time. Because Duck You Sucker also, or yes, it does. Let's see, what's it called? A Fistful of Dynamite and Once Upon a Time, The Revolution. So it's still a weird kind of trilogy, though, because because they don't really have anything. I mean, yeah, I guess you could still say it's thematic, but I've never seen it anyway. But I've seen his others. I've seen the Dollars trilogy, and I've seen Once Upon a Time in the West. I go back and forth. Sometimes I think of Once Upon a Time in the West as the best Western. Sometimes not, but even when not, it's up really high for me. And it might be of all the movies that influenced Tarantino, it might be the one that is like most consistently found in all his films. Like, particularly that whole thing where you have two characters talking and there's crazy tension because like somebody's going to kill somebody or something like that. Like that seems to have originated in Once Upon a Time in the West. I'm not saying like that means nobody else can do it. I'm just saying that's something Tarantino that obviously really struck a chord with him because like he would return to it again and again in a lot of his movies and do it very well. Like I think he does it really well. I really like it, especially in the opening scene of Inglourious Bastards.
Oh man, yeah, I love that.
My favorite Tarantino movies are Inglourious Bastards and the two Kill Bills. So I realize that makes me different from a lot of Tarantino fans. Or, I mean, I don't even consider myself a Tarantino fan, so I guess that's why. But I just mean, so yeah, those are my favorite movies that he did. Although I do enjoy others.
Yeah, I mean, he gets a bad rap for ripping off other directors, but I mean, honestly, like
I don't judge him too harshly for it.
You want to complain about De Palma ripping off Hitchcock, or which he did quite a bit.
I guess it all just depends upon how well it was done.
He's not
good
like
of a rip-off, is
it? Saying I'm not doing it. I mean, he's pretty obvious when he's like, "This is the shit I like, and this is the movies I make," and you see direct correlations in between the two.
But even though Leone was near the end of his life when he made this film, he didn't know that. And actually, the reason he didn't make another film wasn't because of health. It was because this movie left him heartbroken. He was planning on directing a film about the siege of Leningrad and was going to use De Niro again. But he died 2 days before anything could have started on that.
Oh, wow. 2 days.
So that would have been interesting.
How old was he when he died?
I mean, he was old, but not old. Hold on. Shit. Let's see here. He was... Oh, my God. Slowness. He was 60.
Wow. No, that's not old.
Not at all at all. So, yeah, I mean, he was still... Yeah, so he wasn't even. I was thinking maybe he was 72 or something, but 60. Wow. So, but I knew that had to make sense because of the fact that like he died so long ago. He died in '89. So yeah, he died before any home version of this came out. And the fact that what's his name, the music guy, is still alive today, and they were contemporaries of I think fairly similar ages. Let's see here. He was born in 1929.
Mm-hmm.
So let's find Morricone. Ennio Morricone. Damn it. Too many things open. Ennio. Is that how you say it? Ennio? Yeah, he was born in 28, so Morricone is a year older than him, and he's still alive. So he's 91 now.
Jeez, that's old. Yeah. And this guy's been dead for 30 years.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, not to laugh about it. I'm just saying it's been a long time.
I know what you mean. But I haven't heard everything he's done. But of what I've heard, I think this to me this is his best score. He actually did the music for Red Sonja. That's funny.
Yeah, that is funny.
Speaking of a terrible movie.
That's not good. I was trying to, have you seen a cause of death anywhere? I was just curious.
Oh, right. Yeah, hold on.
Just kind of assumed it was something, sudden, some sort of disease. Doesn't say on Wikipedia.
Huh.
But isn't it odd, a film of this scale with so many actors that Clint Eastwood wasn't in there, like at least in a minor role?
Or Once Upon a Time in America?
Yeah, just because that was kind of his guy,
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah, right. Because they had such a relationship. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe Clint Eastwood was busy with something else. Because if you do look it up, so many names of actors were attached to it at one point or another. Because all throughout the 70s, it was in sort of like a developmental stage, right? And he was considering all sorts of different actors. Clint Eastwood's not a name I see there, but who knows? The other thing is actually, even though Once Upon a Time in America was a big deal to Leone and really important, as we said, he turned down Godfather and other things and projects and put a lot of time and effort into it. His original intent was not to direct it himself. He wanted to be the producer and guide another director. In fact, he was looking at John Milius for it. But Milius was big at the 70s. He was writing the script for Apocalypse Now and doing something else, so he couldn't commit to it. So even though this is a movie that was such a big deal to him and so important to him and everything, he originally did not intend to direct it. I think it's pretty interesting. I mean, I'm very glad he did. Oh, a few other things here, like it's funny, like I can't really think of too many actresses who would have been in the right age, like Jennifer Connelly was at the time. But Brooke Shields was considered for the part at one point, and that would totally work too.
Yeah,
she even has the same sort of beauty.
They have a similar look to them. Yeah.
Yeah, there's something about their mouths.
Eyes too.
Yeah, they have They both have a very classic look. That's why they work really well in period pieces. Now, I realize you could say, like, a lot of women, these actresses and stuff, you doll them up and you put them in the right clothes and makeup and they'll fit the period piece. But still, I do think there are some actresses that have a look that harkens back to them. And I think that for sure Connelly has that. I was thinking about the other day, I was watching a movie I like a lot. I liked it a lot as a kid, I guess that's why, is The Rocketeer. And she's in that.
Mm-hmm.
And that movie's set in the late 30s, and they do a really good job of making her look, like of that era. She just seems to look like, I don't know, like a Veronica Lake or, somebody that she evokes that.
She looks like a pinup almost. Like she's got that classic, beauty. And
since we always have to ruin things by getting all chauvinistic, I have to say, like, it seems unfortunate to me that she had breast reduction surgery, but that's her business. I'm sure she had a reason for it. Yeah.
Connelly did.
Yeah.
I was looking at photos of her a little while ago, and I was noticing that. Damn it.
Yeah, early Connelly, much more endowed.
Damn it.
But again, it's not like she had huge breasts, so I'm not really sure why she did it. Like, I understand. See, the women that had, like, really massive breasts to the point where it's either a distraction or it causes back problems, I totally get it. Like, sure, I understand. But with somebody like Connelly, I don't see why, but it's her body and her business. And she still is very beautiful and was beautiful afterwards and stuff. I'm just saying, but you can do a compare contrast, and if you want to see her cleavage or whatever in a glory, you can watch The Rocketeer, where it's even though.
Yeah, that's a crime against humanity, man.
But I always really like Jennifer Connelly. Oh yeah, we've had some very long, deep discussions about breasts.
Relatively slender, women that have, naturally large breasts.
I know that's like the jackpot. That's like the perfect ratio you look for, like in dating and stuff.
They're like, my back hurts and blah blah blah. Like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
I kid.
But yeah, since I still have Disney Plus at the moment, I was really thrilled to find the Rocketeer on there. So she's not.
It's been one.
Her acting's pretty bad in it too, even though she's a good actress. Like she's like, I don't know, not really trying.
That's one I've wanted to go back and revisit.
It's fun. I mean, I'm just a big fan of that sort of era and stuff. You know, like, I mean, it's not from back then, but you know, it's supposed to be just like the Indiana Jones stuff. It's supposed to harken back to that time of like pulp and serials, adventure and stuff. And I really like that. I dig that stuff. So, like most great things in life, it was a comic in its original form. A comic, it came out in '82, and then it's had various revivals through the years, here and there.
I feel like it wasn't.
Never read it.
It wasn't as popular as it should have been.
No, it was like I'm sure a lot of people thought it would be kind of like have some, maybe not big as Indiana Jones, but maybe have that effect, and it just sort of came and went. I don't know. I like it. It's a fun movie.
Joe Johnston did that one. Okay, I was trying to see who directed it.
Yeah, I looked up Joe Johnston during that. Man, he's had a bland career. If you want to talk about movies, like his movies are so bland. Like not necessarily bad, but you know they're just so boring. Like Jumanji's on there, I think. Like,
yeah, Shrunk the Kids.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch that again soon too. That's another big favorite of mine.
Oh, he was the second choice for the Wolfman.
Yeah, the one good movie he did, and I don't even know how he got it, was the Captain America movie. He got to do he got to do the first Captain America movie. I have no idea why. Not saying he shouldn't have gotten it, but
that may be my favorite movie in the Marvel universe.
The first one. My favorite movie in the Marvel universe is the second Captain America. Actually, is Winter Soldier. That's my favorite.
Oh yeah, I like that one a lot too. That's my favorite. I was always a big Captain America fan back when Captain America was kind of like considered like a dork or whatever.
Yeah.
You know,
I was never a fan until probably in the early 2000s when Ed Brubaker started writing him. Not that he hadn't ever been good before that, because I was, like you said, about him being a dork. I was one of those people that was probably, I assumed too much, right? I was like, okay, you know, he's Captain Flag Waver, America's so great, rah, rah, rah. But he's really not. Like, they do a good job of showing that, like, yes, he's Captain America, but, you know, he's not just like some America's always right and the greatest type thing, you know. There's actually a really good line about that in and it's not even really about Captain America, really, but I'm a huge Daredevil fan, as people know, and Daredevil had some great arcs, and obviously Frank Miller got it going. But Frank Miller returned a little later after his initial run, and he did Born Again, which I think is the greatest Daredevil story. I love Born Again, and at Born Again's ending, when the Kingpin has lost all control and he sicks the character Nuke, who's this mind-warped, crazy super soldier who's just blasting the hell out of Hell's Kitchen, and it's more than Daredevil can handle. Since it's such a big deal, the Avengers actually show up, and Miller does a great job because they're only in like just a couple panels. You barely see them, but you see that Thor, Cap, and Iron Man are all there to bring Nuke down. But there's a part where after Nuke is brought into custody, they're all saying it's a big snafu about they're not sure what to do with him because technically he's a government agent. Technically he's supposed to like work for the American government. They're not sure how Kingpin got a hold of him. And there's a part where like some general is like talking about like how they're not sure what they're going to do. And he's talking to Captain America. And Captain America's looking all stately, and he's in the office, and there's an American flag in it. Captain America's sort of looking at the flag, and the general's like, well, you understand how these things work, Cap, blah, blah, blah. And he says something like, and you have such a great track record, and we can always count on you. And you've always been loyal. And Cap turns to him, and he's holding sort of the flag in his hands, and he says, I'm loyal to nothing, sir, except the dream. And I think that's great, because it shows, you know, like he's not some, you know, government stooge or some guy you can use like as a prop or something like that. Like he believes in America, you know, like right. the goodness that America can achieve. He's not saying America doesn't have any flaws and it's, you know, doesn't make mistakes. He's saying I believe in the dream. I think that's really great, and that's Frank Miller. So yeah, that's another thing that sort of turned me around on Cap, because he was often written pretty well. But the Brubaker stuff, which is actually where Winter Soldier came from, he's the one that made up the whole thing about Bucky actually living and being the Winter Soldier. And it's a really great book because it's really espionage type stuff, and it's full of like Cold War intrigue and stuff. It's really good. But yeah, he's done really well in the movies. They did a good job. But yeah, the second one's my favorite. It has Bucky, and speaking of martial artists, it has a great scene with George St. Pierre as Bartrock. Bartrock the Leaper is his full name.
Oh, I forgot about that.
A really good fight. Plus, it's good because it's nice to see somebody like an MMA fighter. Like, it shows that, like, you know, they're in there, they're fighting, it's fun. But it's like, yeah, George can do some flashy stuff, like stuff that you wouldn't do in a normal fight. You know, he's doing some flips and crazy kicks and stuff, and like, he's really doing that. That's not wire work or anything.
Well, George's original training was karate, right?
Yeah, he was a karate prodigy.
So,
not to go into a whole other thing, but the thing that impresses me the most about George is that a lot of these guys that were really good at like the wrestling, they were either Brazilian guys that came up with the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or they were American guys that were like all-American wrestlers in like college. They in probably like high school, then college. Like they were like national champions. Is that George learned all that stuff late in life for a martial artist. He learned like wrestling when he was like 20, 21. And then he went on to be like one of the most dominant at that. That's where, like, he didn't have that background. His background was karate. Then he, like, in his late teens, early 20s, he got into MMA and he was trying to learn Brazilian jiu-jitsu and wrestling and stuff. And he was much older than most of those guys. So that's one of the main things that impresses me about him.
That's just natural talent, man. Is all that is.
Yeah, a lot of people said like he was just one of those super athletes that would have been like great at almost anything he did, which I can believe.
I agree with that. I mean, if you've got the determination and the work ethic and, you know, the natural talent and ability.
He definitely had the determination, because when he was learning that stuff, he was living in Quebec, of course, but he was crossing the border into, like, I'm not sure, maybe it was New York or something. He was taking buses to learn from people there. And he was staying in, like, flop houses and stuff, just like the cheapest thing going, just so that he could, like, be there to learn from people, because there weren't any people available in Quebec at the time. So, yeah, he really was dedicated. You can't say he wasn't.
Riding like hours and hours on buses to train.
Yeah, crazy stuff.
What's the name of that documentary?
Is that is that Take Down the DNA of GSP?
Yeah,
I think that's the one. Yeah.
So you guys are interested, you can go check that out. It's a really great doc.
Yeah. He talks about that in it. Oh, I miss training. I got to get back to some. Got to hit something.
Yeah.
I broke my toe last week. It's almost healed now. My little toe, luckily.
Yeah,
and as people know, there's nothing you can do. If you went to the hospital and broke your little toe, there's no point. They'll just be like, you might as well go home because we can't do anything. I did it in the dumbest way, too. I walked into my vacuum cleaner. I don't know how. But my toe was totally purple.
I've done that quite
so much for a few days. And then once it stopped hurting on its own, and like if I wore a shoe or something, like it was really painful. And then after that, it wasn't as painful. Like I wasn't limping anymore, but it just felt really tight. I remember I broke it on Monday afternoon, and on Thursday I was at the library doing my gym. So sitting there for 2 hours, I just feel all the pressure. I'm like, I just want to take this off. But over the weekend, it's like the bruising has faded and stuff, and now I get a little twinge here and there, but it's pretty good. So. Yeah. But yeah, I was just thinking I can't kick anything. But that's okay. I haven't kicked anything in months. Not that you want to make impact with toe. Oh, here's the thing. There is a type of kick where you want to make an impact with your toe. And you're thinking, that's impossible. If you do that, you'll break your toe. And this is related to GSP in a way. Because it's related to, there's a French martial art called savate. And in savate, unlike most martial arts, you have footwear. You're not barefoot. You have savate-like shoes. And so there's a specific kick in savate where you actually kick with your toe, because it's like kicking with the toe of a boot. And GSP's character, Bartrock, he's French. Well, he's Algerian technically, but he is a master of savate. So he did those kicks in the comics and stuff. So he's such a goofy character in the comics. They try to make that. I mean, he was like a lot of, he's in the 60s. He was called Bartrock the Leaper. He wore a purple costume. He had a weird beard, and he flipped around and jumped and spoke in a terrible French accent. But, I mean, they were like, hey, we're going to make a Captain America movie. GSP, he's a French-Canadian. Everything lines up perfectly. You can be Bartrock. And, you know, they made him a much, like, better, cooler Bartrock. That's the difference between Marvel and DC. I've said this a million times. When Marvel has, like, goofy stuff from the past, they update it and change it a bit. DC fucking doubles down. Yeah. They say, yup, that's right. We're going with the Newsboy Legion. Yep. That's it.
So many bad
We're not going to phase it out. I mean, if anybody wants to ask, like within the context of like what's crazier or goofier or sillier, more childish when you're talking about superhero worlds with people that can fly and ghosts and monsters and aliens, there is a right answer. Which one is goofier and sillier? I'll tell you, the one with the Newsboy Legion, the one with the chimpanzee who's a detective that dresses up like Sherlock Holmes, the one with the Metal Men, the one with I said the Newsboy Legion, the one with Plastic Man, the one with there's at least so many more like weird, crazy, goofy things that I could mention that
Did you ever watch
that are part
Shazam?
of DC. Watch what?
Shazam?
Yeah, it's okay. But that's part of it too. The Marvel family. Oh my god, the Marvel family is ridiculous. And then again, because it's from the goddamn 40s. A kid says Shazam and he turns into a powerful Hulk. Now there's the Marvel, and he has a Marvel family. There's Mary Marvel. There's a dog Marvel, I think. There's Uncle Marvel, who's friends with a tiger that talks. Like, all this shit is still there in your face in present day DC. You might not see it in movies, but it's there in the comics because the writers love it. They love that shit. I'm reading 52 right now, and 52 has that stuff in it. This is from 2006. This has all sorts of great stuff, like Renee Montoya from Gotham and all sorts of cool things. But it also doubles down on the crazy shit.
Yeah, I feel like it plays a lot better in that form.
Yeah,
I like,
sure.
I like crazy shit.
I like crazy shit too, but I'm just saying, if you're going to split hairs between, I'd say, like, oh, here, see, look. See Detective Chimp? There he is. A serious character playing a serious role in this serious story. That's him and Ralph Dibny having a really serious conversation. Ralph Dibny, by the way, is the elongated man. People forget. It's a poor man's Reed Richards, but instead of being a scientist, he's a detective. There's the House of Mystery, which has Cain and Abel in it. I like the House of Mystery, but Cain and Abel's a little on the nose. But anyway, just saying. Like, in a way, you have to respect DC for that, though, too. They're just like, fuck, we won't change anything. We're not going to update shit. If it was cool in 1945, it's cool now, is basically how they feel. I mean, it's still important that, you know, a big part of Superman's backstory still is the Legion, those guys from the future. Remember them? Lightning Lad, Saturn Girl, like ridiculous names. But anyway. Anyways, we've gone all over the place, and I guess we can finish up tonight. We usually had other stuff to talk about, but a very big movie with lots of stuff to say. So yeah, that's one of my favorite movies. It's my favorite gangster movie, or at least my favorite Western gangster movie. I like some Chinese gangster movies more. It's one of my favorite movies of the 80s. It's one of my favorite scores. Yeah, I just love this movie. I mean, I get it's a little heavy on the melodrama parts, but it totally works for me. I love it. And I love how the music works. It's funny, like Robert De Niro's fine in it, and he's good in it, but it's not necessarily essential. Like I could picture somebody else in the role, not Richard Dreyfuss, as I said, but somebody else. I think James Woods, though, is a really good choice. It was a big star-making term for James Woods, who hadn't really been in big movies to that point, or at least not in leading roles. It was the film debut for the beautiful and talented Jennifer Connelly. It was sadly the last film of Sergio Leone's career, but a really good one. And of course, also very sadly, executive meddling and stuff like messed it all up. So he didn't get to see it done proper justice. It didn't happen until after he died, which is really too bad. It really soured him on films. He said, you look at it as sort of a last lingering echo of the new Hollywood era. It checks all the boxes for those sorts of films, even though it came out probably a few years after the unofficial death. It has a lot in common with something like Heaven's Gate, except I think this is actually very good, whereas Heaven's Gate is not. But anyway, if you're interested in that, see our show on Heaven's Gate. We talk all about it. And we do mention there are some good things about Heaven's Gate. It's not terrible. There are some good things. There are some memorable things. But yeah, this movie's made me think a lot about Westerns and stuff, even just because of Sergio Leone, because a lot of his career was Western. So I think maybe down the line we might do one. I was thinking was really interesting. It's not like your typical Western, because it's not an American Western. It's the Australian Western, The Proposition. Have you seen that?
I don't believe so.
That's an under the radar movie that I like a lot. I actually own it. It's got Guy Pearce in it. and a few other cool actors. Anyway, that's an Australian Western. And it's got a pretty simple setup. It's like there's this Guy Pearce is part of this gang of criminals with a few of his brothers. And what is it? Him and his younger brother get caught. And they're locked up. And the sheriff or whatever of this really, isolated Australian town says, like, look, I don't really care about you and your brother. I care about your older brother because he's the leader of the gang and he's a big time criminal. What I'm going to do is and here's our opposition. I'm going to set you free and you're going to go find your fucking brother and you're going to bring him to me so I can hang him, or I'll hang your little brother. So that's the proposition. So he has to go get him. It's pretty cool. And the older brother is a real evil bastard too. He's terrible. Oh, what's his name? Old British guy. John Hurt is in it, and he's crazy in it. John Hurt plays like some guy who's been like lost out in the outback for too long, and his mind is snapped. It's pretty good. It's a very philosophical type of movie. A lot of musing in it, but anyway. But yeah, you should look for that because I think that could be a good show. I really like that movie. Yeah,
I've just added it to my list.
The music's by somebody important too, but I can't remember who. But anyway, somebody I like did the music. Nick Cave. Nick Cave did the music. Nick Cave's cool. But anyway, so as always, we have a few ideas going forward. We're still probably a ways off from doing any more series because we've had so much trouble lately with just getting some shows together that like if we did a series, we'd just be asking for trouble because we'd have big gaps in it for now. So until things stabilize a little, we won't do a series, but we have a few ideas for that too. But as we say, we're always hopeful for the future that we'll get a little more consistency going here. I don't think my connection's been good today at all. At least my video doesn't look smooth. I don't know what's going on, but at least my audio seems to be working okay, so that's good. So anyway, that's Once Upon a Time in America, Sergio Leone, 1984. It is epic. It is long. There's a lot in it. There's probably other entire things that maybe we didn't get to or discuss or I'll think of later, but it's a big movie. There's a lot of meat to it, a lot of stuff to talk about. But the main thing I want to get across is that I really like it. It's a movie I've always really, really liked. I know it's really long, but I still think it's really worth it. It is interesting to think of, like what you said, is the kind of the same thing was Leone's original intention was to have 2 separate 3-hour movies. That could have been cool, but the distributors were having none of it. And then later they had none of his normal movie either because they chopped it to bits. And I really hate the changing the scenes around. Like that really ruins it. I mean, not only are you cutting stuff out, but like to move the scenes around so to make the story linear, like that sucks. Like I love the transitions between the time frames. I think that's one of the best things about the movie.
Mm-hmm.
At the score. But anyway, as I said when I lead off, no, I don't. This isn't my smarmy, better alternative to The Godfather. I think The Godfather is very good, and Godfather 2 is very good. I just personally like it more. And I'm not saying you get everything in this that you get in The Godfather. No, you should watch both of them, obviously. Because usually when I'm doing those things, I'm saying, yeah, you don't necessarily need to do that. But that's more like a thing where I say, yeah, you don't need to watch Basic Instinct because I think Basic Instinct sucks. You can watch Sea of Love. I think Sea of Love's good and basic. And it's not even necessarily like sucks. I just think it's beaten in every way by Dark City, a movie that we did on this show. So that's kind of what I mean. But no, this I do not think is like some better, smarter, cooler alternative to Godfather. So don't misquote me on that, people. I just like it more. I'm not saying it's better. So I guess we can finish up there if you have any final thoughts.
No, I think you pretty much hit it all. It's a film I've come to like more and more the more I watch it. It's a good one. It's definitely, like you said, it echoes the new Hollywood.
Yeah, for sure. So much scope and ambition, but I think it all really pays off, and for a lot of reasons. And I love the score, really great score. So yeah, really cool movie, very emotional movie, very intense movie at certain points. But I know we said there's rape in it and stuff, but I don't think it's going to really upset anybody. I mean, unless you're particularly sensitive.
Yeah, I mean,
it's rape. It's not brutal, awful rape. I mean, it's still rape, and it is emotionally devastating considering the context of when it happens and stuff like that. So, but anyway, I think it's pretty well done, and I think it's important, and you shouldn't cut it out. So, but yeah, so I'm sure it wasn't in when it was on TV whenever I saw it 1,000 years ago. It's so hard to remember, but I'm almost positive that when I was very young that it did air on TV, and I watched at least some of it. I mean, I know sometimes we get things mixed up in our heads, and you're maybe misattributing stuff, and it could be a different movie. But there's just some very specific things I remember, like him, like him watching her dancing in the 1918 stuff, like with the music playing. I'm sure that's a really old memory, but I don't know. I guess I could be conflating it or mixing it up with something else. I'm not sure. But anyway, so that will do for this week. Thanks a lot for being back with us. I know it's a little hard following us when we've had some weeks off, but we try our best to get the word out there so people know. So hopefully next week we'll do a show on Tuesday or Wednesday. That is definitely the plan. That is definitely the intent. So we'll work that out as we go forward, and we'll let you know. So thanks a lot again. So that Once Upon a Time in America. That's Jay. I'm Cole. Have a good night. We'll see you later. Sooner than later.